Chapter 510. The next few days were very peaceful. It was so peaceful that it was as if nothing had happened. Pushan Nun still brought her disciples to chant scriptures every day, but the time of chanting was not fixed. Although Xiao Wanru came every day, she had almost never met it. The old maid in charge of Duke Xing's mansion came over every day to remove some unnecessary fruit pots and pastries, replace them with new ones, and then serve them in the Buddha hall. No matter Xiao Wanru came over or Pushan Nun came to chant scriptures, they would serve them and immediately complete their orders. Time passed quickly. In the blink of an eye, more than 10 days had passed. Xiao Wanru got up early this morning. Seeing that it was still dark outside, Yujie wanted Xiao Wanru to sleep a little longer. However, Xiao Wanru shook her head and asked Yujie to freshen up for her. Chu Lu brought breakfast over early. After eating, they went to the Buddha hall where the ritual was performed. Today, old madam would go up the mountain and offer incense in person. When they arrived at the Buddha hall, they found that Pushan Nun had already been there with Hui Qing and Hui Ming. The Buddha incense in the hall, accompanied by the charming chanting of scriptures, gave them a sense of detachment from the world. After offering incense, Xiao Wanru knelt down on the rush cushion on one side. Old madam also came very early. Not long after she knelt down, the people of Duke Xing's mansion came over. They were old madam of Duke Xing, madam of Duke Xing, Xiao Yanru, Xiao Hua and Xiao Jia. Except for Duke Xing, all the people of the second branch came, but none of the people of the third branch came. Hearing a voice coming from behind, Xiao Wanru stood up and stood aside with her head lowered. Old madam came in. After offering incense, they temporarily retreated to the side hall to rest, and Xiao Wanru was also called to follow them. Old madam sat in the side hall with a straight face, and no one could tell whether she was happy or angry. Madam of Duke Xing, sitting on the side, looked at Xiao Wanru with a bit of malice in her eyes, but there was a kind smile on her face. Xiao Yanru stood behind old madam and gently patted her back. She also looked at Xiao Wanru with a kind smile. Xiao Jia was also looking Xiao Wanru up and down. When they were in the mansion, they had only met a few times, but they hardly talked to each other. It was the first time for Xiao Hua to see Xiao Wanru. He was also looking Xiao Wanru up and down calmly with the reserved and elegant look of a noble child from an aristocratic family. His eyes were very gentle. She was just a sister who had been found, so he really didn't understand why his mother and sister looked like they were facing a formidable enemy. Under everyone's burning gaze, Xiao Wanru walked over slowly. Every step she took was very regular, as if she had measured it. Even old madam, who was picky, couldn't find fault with her. She frowned unconsciously. Almost subconsciously, she didn't want to see such an outstanding little granddaughter. Xiao Wanru took a few steps forward and greeted old madam first, followed by madam of Duke Xing. When she stood still and raised her head, everyone, starting from old madam, stared at her face in astonishment. It was quiet in the main hall for a while. Her skin was fair and translucent, sparkling and translucent. It was as smooth as the most flawless jade. Her pair of misty eyes carried a bit of clarity. It was a bit contradictory, but it felt like it should be like this. It was breathtaking. Her cherry lips were red, and the most outstanding part was her delicate little face. Her beauty was pure, but there was also a bit of incongruous charm. But even so, it didn't make people feel that she was coquettish. The innocence that came from her bones eased the charm of being looked down upon. Her generous behavior, decent movements, and amazing face all showed that the fifth Miss Xiao in front of them was very different from 2 years ago. She was no longer the childish child at that time. Even though she was still young, no one could deny her beauty and otherworldliness at this time. That's right, no one could imagine the seductive charm of being looked down upon by others. Combined with her natural behavior and innocent demeanor, coupled with her black clothes, it actually made people feel that this color was a kind of otherworldly and refined. This kind of color should only exist in heaven. How many people in the human world could smell it? This was what many people thought in their hearts. Xiao Huan was also stunned. He knew that his fifth sister was very beautiful, but he didn't expect her to be so beautiful. He was used to seeing his sister's beautiful face and thought that no matter how beautiful Xiao Wanru was, she couldn't be compared with his sister. He didn't expect that Xiao Yanru's beauty could be immediately degraded at first sight. He pursed his lips and looked at his fifth sister seriously for the first time. Xiao Yanru suppressed the jealousy in her eyes and slowly lowered her head with coldness in her eyes. Even if there was no other grudge between her and Xiao Wanru, she would destroy her just because of Xiao Yanru's beauty. Xiao Jia opened her mouth wide and couldn't believe her eyes. She had the same thought as Xiao Huan. She thought that although Xiao Wanru was beautiful, she was definitely not as beautiful as Xiao Yanru. When she saw Xiao Wanru at the beginning, although she felt that Xiao Wanru was outstanding, she didn't feel amazed. But today, he was astonished by it. She even thought that if Infanta Qinghua was also so beautiful at that time, it was no wonder that her first uncle had to ask for a decree to marry Infanta Qinghua. Madame of Duke Xing coughed in a low voice and glanced at Xiao Wanru's face with coldness in her eyes. But then she withdrew her eyes and said with a gentle smile, "Wanru has really grown up. Second aunt can't recognize you at once. You are so beautiful. Mother, you look like first sister-in-law." Old Madam was very shocked. She looked Xiao Wanru up and down several times with a serious look in her eyes. Since Xiao Wanru was so beautiful, should she change some of her means? When she was thinking about it, she suddenly heard Madame of Duke Xing's words. She immediately looked displeased and snorted coldly, "You do look like Infanta Qinghua, but don't be like your mother, who always makes her own decisions. Now you are the fifth miss of Duke Xing's mansion, and your words and deeds represent Duke Xing's mansion. Don't do anything else." The meaning of her words was very obvious. Yu Jie, who was behind Xiao Wanru, was so angry that her face turned red. How could a grandmother who hadn't seen her granddaughter for a few years scold her and insult her Mrs. biological mother? Thanks to old Madame of Duke Xing's reminder. My grandma also said that I look like my mother and asked me to take warning from my mother in the future. Xiao Wanru said calmly. She raised her watery eyes and looked a little brilliant in her indifferent expression. She was extremely beautiful. In fact, Xiao Wanru didn't look like Infanta Qinghua very much. Otherwise, Rui and Great Elder Princess would have recognized her at that time. Her eyes were most similar to Infanta Qinghua's, but the rest was not so similar. It seemed that she agreed with old Madam, but she secretly contradicted old Madam. As for calling old Madam Dowager and Rui, and Great Elder Princess 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 Rui, and there was a little anger in old Madam's eyes. She snorted coldly and said, "You may not listen to my words. You were like this at that time, and you are still like this now. It has been almost 3 years, but why are you still so stubborn?" These words were quite harsh. In front of so many people, she saw her granddaughter after such a long time, but she didn't say any words of concern. Instead, she rebuked and dissatisfied her everywhere. "Old Madam, I don't know what I said wrong to make old Madam judge me like this." Xiao Wanru raised her head with a little coldness in her watery eyes, which made her little face look very indifferent and less respectful. You. Being stared at by her less respectful gaze, old Madam was so angry that she pointed at her and couldn't even say a word. "Old Madam, if you don't like me, you cannot come to see me. I will still worship Buddha on the mountain quietly." Xiao Wanru slowly lowered her head and said lightly. She didn't intend to give in. She had always disliked old Madam and disliked everything she did. In this case, there was no need for her to be too humble. "How can your grandmother not want to see you? Even as your second aunt, I also look forward to seeing you every day. If it weren't for the fact that your third aunt is seriously ill now, she would definitely come to see you this time." Madame of Duke Xing stood up and pretended to persuade her. Since she wanted to maintain a hypocritical face, she must come to persuade her at this time. Fifth sister. Xiao Hua then came over to greet her with a smile. Big brother. Xiao Wanru said. Fifth sister. Fifth sister. Xiao Yenru and Xiao Jia also came over to greet her. Big sister, second sister. Xiao Wanru bowed to them one by one. The whole family seemed to be happy and harmonious. Seeing that they were close to each other, old madam looked a little better. She took a look at Xiao Wanru and pointed to a chair beside her and said, "Sit down and talk." "Thank you, old madam." Xiao Wanru said softly. "You also sit down. Let's talk about the religious rite." Old madam nodded and looked at the others. The others also sat down again. Only Xiao Yenru returned to old madam's back and patted her back. Old madam thought that it was impossible for Xiao Wanru to be so considerate. Sure enough, Xiao Wanru, who was not raised by her, had no affection for her. Looking at the few words that Xiao Wanru said just now in the title of old madam, she didn't regard her as her biological grandmother at all. Hearing this title, old madam felt very aggrieved. "Don't call me old madam. You are grandma's granddaughter. It's not appropriate to call you like this." Xiao Hua reminded her softly with a smile. Madam of Duke Xing glared at her son unhappily. She had long known that this title was not appropriate, but she was unwilling to remind him. She just wanted to see old madam being unhappy, but she could only hold it in. In the end, she vented her anger on Xiao Wanru, but her son spoiled her plan. "Yes, big brother, I am not used to it for a while," Xiao Wanru said with an excellent attitude. Old madam coughed in a low voice and said with a straight face, "I shouldn't have discussed this matter with you, but now there are only you and your brother in your branch. Your brother is still young and ignorant, so I have to discuss this matter with you now, lest you feel that I am partial when the time comes." Chapter 5:11. There are 3 days left before the religious rite. In the last 3 days, I will stay on the mountain temporarily and go down the mountain after the religious rite. During these days, you should stay in the Buddha hall every day and prepare to worship your biological parents. You should pay attention to them, old madam said with a lecturing look. Her words implied that Xiao Wanru didn't pay attention to it before, which made Yujie so angry that she wanted to step forward and defend Xiao Wanru. The religious rite was basically more formal in the last few days. How could someone stay in the Buddha hall every day for 10 days or half a month? It would be exhausting. Old madam had sent someone to tell her that she just needed to take care of it and come to see it every day. Now she actually meant that she not only had to see it but also had to stay in the Buddha hall all the time. Xiao Wanru raised the corners of her mouth with a faint sneer. She reached out and waved her hand behind her, indicating that Yujie should not act rashly. She turned her eyes, raised her eyes, and said, "I don't know that I have to stay here every day for more than 10 days during the religious rite. In the past, when I was in Jiangzhou, which was probably a small place in the countryside, I only needed to stay here for the last 3 days for my relatives and juniors." Her voice was soft without a trace of displeasure, but the meaning of her words was like a slap in old madam's face, which made old madam's face turn livid with anger. This was not only the rule in Jiangzhou, but also the rule in the capital city. Old madam just felt comfortable scolding Yujie and forgot this rule. Hearing Xiao Wanru's words, she immediately knew that she had deviated. She was ashamed and annoyed at the moment and almost couldn't control herself from smashing the teacup in her hand. Sure enough, she had the same bloodline as Rui, and great elder princess. She was annoying to look at. "Grandma, you are so anxious about the affairs of eldest uncle and eldest aunt that you even forget this." Xiao Yenru hurriedly helped old madam out with a smile. Old madam nodded and leaned back. She looked at Xiao Wanru coldly and said, "I'm too concerned about you. You are in a mess. I'm too concerned about you. Grandma, not only you, but I am also confused. If it weren't for fifth sister's words, I would have really forgotten this matter." Xiao Yenru covered her mouth and said with a soft smile, Xiao Wanru sneered in her heart when she saw the two of them talking enthusiastically. They meant that they were very concerned about it, but she, as their daughter, was not concerned about it. My sister is also very diligent, but maternal grandmother said that this matter can only come up in the last 3 days. I originally wanted to come up early, but maternal grandmother said that the last 3 days are the rules. A voice came from the door. Everyone raised their heads and saw a young man walking over. His handsome face was a little cold. Xiao Wanru was stunned for a moment, but she suddenly felt a little familiar from his face. She unconsciously said in a trembling voice, "How, sister." Xiao Yuanhao strode in, stood beside Xiao Wanru, bowed to old madam, and said, "Grandma, I'm late." "How, Old madam stood up excitedly and reached out to touch the little boy's head. The naive child had suddenly become a little boy. Although he was not very tall, he was no longer the little boy who was ignorant of worldly affairs. At such a young age, he had a calmness that was different from his age. Xiao Wanru's eyes turned red inexplicably. This was her younger brother, who was related to her by blood. She stared at him with her watery eyes. This was the first time she had seen her younger brother in more than 2 years. In the past, there were only some letters sent by Rui and Great Elder Duke's mansion, which let them know some things about each other. "Grandma." Xiao Yuanhao took 2 steps forward, held old madam's hand, and said affectionately. He was different from Xiao Wanru. After all, he had been raised by old madam since he was a child, so he had deep feelings for old madam. How. Old madam held Xiao Yuanhao in her arms and burst into tears. In the past 2 years, old madam had very little time to see this little grandson. Rui and Great Elder Princess almost did not let him come to Duke Xing's mansion, except for special and necessary circumstances. At this moment, seeing her beloved grandson in front of her, old madam couldn't hold back and burst into tears. Therefore, everyone tried to persuade old madam to sit down again. Xiao Yuanhao also sat in front of old madam. "Is it comfortable living in Great Elder Princess's mansion?" Old madam held Xiao Yuanhao's hand and refused to let go. "Grandma, don't worry. Grandma is very good to me. Everything is very comfortable. It's okay." Xiao Yuanhao said with a smile. "If there is anything, remember to inform me. Do you hear me? I have been worried about you. I want to see you, but I can't." Old madam wiped her tears again. "Grandma, don't worry. I have been studying well recently. Grandma said that she would let me go out more often. I will definitely come to see you then." Xiao Yuanhao said with a smile. He held old madam's hand and shook it coquettishly. He was still young. Even if his actions looked a little coquettish, she did not think it was ugly. Moreover, he was good-looking like a fairy child, which made people's hearts soften. Old madam was about to cry again. She said yes repeatedly and became more dissatisfied with Rui and Great Elder Princess in her heart. He was obviously her own flesh and blood, but she forced him to leave, so that she could not see her little grandson now even if she wanted to. "Grandma, when I came here just now, I seemed to hear you all scolding my sister. Did my sister do something wrong?" Xiao Yuanhao rolled his eyes and suddenly looked at Xiao Wanru. He stood up, stretched out his other hand and pulled Xiao Wanru over. "Sister, what happened just now?" "Nothing. What can happen? Grandma is just teaching me," Xiao Wanru said with a smile. She was in a good mood when she saw her younger brother grow up. It could be seen that her grandma was really teaching her younger brother attentively. Xiao Yuanhao, who used to be like a little bully, had disappeared, and was replaced by a smart little Yuanhao. Judging from his behavior and expression, he was obviously no longer the careless young master who was about to be raised to the point of disability. "How could I scold your sister? I was just talking to your sister about the religious rite. This is your parents' religious rite and I told your sister to pay more attention in the next 3 days." Old madam also explained with a gentle look. She glanced at Xiao Wanru with a kind look. Is big sister also scolding my sister? Xiao Yuanhao looked back at Xiao Yenru with a little childish surprise and displeasure. It was reasonable for old madam to scold Xiao Wanru, but it was not good for Xiao Yenru to scold Xiao Wanru. Although she, as the elder sister, could also say something if her younger sister did something wrong, it was not her place to say anything since all the elders were here. How could third brother say that? Of course, I won't scold fifth sister, Xiao Yenru said with a soft look. Oh, that's good. Xiao Yuanhao looked relieved and specially patted his chest twice, as if his heart had really fallen back into his stomach. However, Xiao Yenru was so angry that her face turned slightly pale and her breathing became a little rapid. Xiao Yuanhao, the boy, had become more and more tactful after more than 2 years. He even implied that he would be relieved if she didn't bully Xiao Wanru. After the break, they returned to the main hall. Pushun Nun led them to recite scriptures for a while and then let them go to rest. Old Madam did not stop her 2 grandsons and let them wander on their own. Madam of Duke Xing still had something to do at the foot of the mountain. After paying respects, she rushed down the mountain at lunchtime, leaving old Madam of Duke Xing alone with her 3 granddaughters to recite scriptures, listen to scriptures, and offer incense piously with Pushun Nun. After lunch, they could rest for a while. Old Madam was tired, so she went to the incense room prepared for her by Yuhui Nunnery to rest. Xiao Yenru and Xiao Jia followed her to serve her, while Xiao Wanru went to her own quiet room to cultivate. Not long after returning to the quiet room and sitting down, Chu Lu came in and reported, "First Miss is here." She came so fast. Xiao Wanru raised her watery eyes slightly and said, "Invite her in." Chu Lu answered and left. After a while, she brought Xiao Yenru in. "Big sister." Xiao Wanru stood up and bowed sideways. Xiao Yenru also bowed sideways, and then explained with a gentle smile, "Grandma is tired and fell asleep after returning home. I can't fall asleep for a while, so I want to visit my old residence." "Fifth sister, do you think it's convenient?" "Why not? This is originally your courtyard, but now I live here temporarily." "Big sister, do you want to go to the main room to have a look?" "I don't have the key over there," Xiao Wanru said with a slight smile. She had guessed that Xiao Yenru would come. Recently, Xiao Yenru seemed to be in a hurry. Thinking of some bits and pieces of the last life, she came to the conclusion that Xiao Yenru was really in a hurry, and it was related to her that she began to deal with her. In the past 2 years, Xiao Yenru seemed to have forgotten her and never made trouble for her. She had thought that Xiao Yenru would hold back until she went down the mountain and returned to Duke Xing's mansion 3 years later. Now it seemed that Xiao Yenru couldn't wait any longer. Xiao Yenru sat down on the mat skillfully. She turned her eyes and had a clear look at the silence room. Xiao Wanru noticed that it seemed that every time she came here, she would glance at the silence room. In fact, it was extremely empty here. There were few things, which could be seen clearly at a glance, except for the soft couch behind the extra screen. In the past, it was just a silence room and the place where Xiao Yenru painted. Now it had become Xiao Wanru's bedroom, and she slept here. "Fifth sister, you sleep here?" Xiao Yenru also saw the screen and asked in surprise. Hearing her question, Xiao Wanru, who had been prepared for it, answered softly, "It's a waste of time for cultivation to walk around. Living here can make one feel more refreshed. I see that Pushun Nun hardly goes out of the silence room, so I think it's good. It's not easy to be distracted, and I can pray for my biological father and mother more devoutly." Chapter 5:12. Fifth sister, I'm going to live in the Yuhui Nunnery these days. I still want to live in the original courtyard. Could you please lend me this courtyard and this silence room for 3 days? I'll return them to you 3 days later. Xiao Yenru asked softly. She was gentle and smiled kindly. What she asked for was just to borrow some time to return to her courtyard, which was a matter of course. All my personal belongings are temporarily placed here. I'm afraid. Xiao Wanru hesitated and looked at something in the silence room. Xiao Yanru was also looking at it. Except for a few paintings in a large book jar, there seemed to be nothing special in it. If you're worried about these paintings, you can take them back first. I'll return them to you 3 days later. Xiao Yanru said with an increasingly sincere smile. Big sister, I'm afraid I can't do that. I've made a wish in front of the Buddha and said that I'll pray for my parents in this silence room during my stay in the Yuhui nunnery. I'll stay here at night and cultivate here during the day. Except for helping my parents like today, I'll spend the rest of my time here. Xiao Wanru said with a guilty look, if I had known that you would come up the mountain, I wouldn't have allowed you to make such a big wish that day. But now, I've made a wish. Since she had made a wish in front of the Buddha, it meant that she would not move out anyway. It was reasonable for Xiao Yanru to give this silence room to Xiao Yanru. If she insisted that Xiao Wanru move out, it would be regarded as her being rude. Even Xiao Yanru, who was shrewd, was so angry that her face changed. Fifth sister, I'm just staying here for a few days. Eldest uncle and eldest aunt won't blame me. She gritted her teeth, suppressed the anger in her heart, and still said with a flattering smile. What did she mean by saying that she had made a wish? She clearly heard that Xiao Wanru was reluctant to part with the personal belongings placed here, so she came up with such a dignified reason. Big sister, how can we take advantage of this kind of thing in the dark room? It is our intention to make a wish for our father. Moreover, we made it in front of Buddha, so we can't take it lightly. If Buddha blames us, the whole Duke Xing's mansion will suffer, Xiao Wanru said with a serious face. Xiao Yanru was so angry that her liver almost hurt. She clenched the handkerchief in her hand tightly, for fear that she couldn't help but hit Xiao Yanru. She had promised Xiao Yanru and was sure that she could do it now, but Xiao Yanru turned it down. Xiao Wanru even pretended that she had deceived Xiao Yanru. Fifth sister, since that's the case, can I stay in my own room for 3 days? Xiao Yanru said softly. If it weren't for her pale knuckles holding the handkerchief, no one could tell that she was extremely angry. Xiao Wanru thought for a while and said with a smile, Big sister, since you insist on living here, I can live in your original room. I haven't moved that room. If you want to use it, you can live with me. It's great to have one more companion. Xiao Yanru was really in a dilemma. The person he was dealing with had her courtyard taken over by him. Furthermore, he had given her an unreasonable reason previously. Now, he seemed to have thought of a reasonable reason to deliberately take over her courtyard, her quiet room. Yet, she was still able to hold back her anger. From this point of view, Xiao Yanru couldn't be underestimated. Xiao Wanru said with a smile on her face, but she was secretly vigilant in her heart. She should be more vigilant against Xiao Yanru. Thank you, fifth sister. Then I'll go to my main room to have a look. I haven't lived in it for a long time, and I need to tidy it up. Xiao Yanru stood up and said softly. Big sister, you only brought one maid here. You don't have enough people. I'll ask Yujie and Qing to help you. Qing is an inferior maid, but she does a good job. Xiao Wanru also stood up with sincere eyes, which was comparable to Xiao Yanru's. Fifth sister, you don't have to bother your maids. When I was on the mountain, I occasionally cleaned the room by myself. It's just one room, so it's okay. Xiao Yanru said politely and turned her eyes to the maid standing beside Xiao Wanru, who called Yujie. She had already found out that Yujie was brought here by Xiao Wanru from Jiangzhou. It seemed that she was loyal and devoted to Xiao Wanru. As for the maid named Qing it was said that she was sent here by Rui, a great elder princess when Xiao Wanru was on the mountain. She was supposed to take care of Xiao Wanru and do some heavy work, so she was just an inferior maid. If she had to choose, she would rather choose this inferior maid named Qing How can I let big sister do it by herself? If you want to do it by yourself, I'll help you. We'll clean it slowly together. It's my fault for occupying your silence room. If I let you clean the room by yourself, I won't have the face to see Grandma tomorrow. Xiao Wanru said with an increasingly sincere smile and asked Yujie to bring a rag over, which meant that she was really going to clean the main room for Xiao Yenru by herself. Seeing Xiao Wanru's attitude, Xiao Yenru immediately made a decision and said, "Fifth sister, you don't have to do it. I've been tired all day, and I actually can't do it. Fifth sister, please borrow Qing's maid to clean the main room with Shuqi." Shuqi was the principal maid brought up the mountain by Xiao Yenru. Hearing that Xiao Yenru heard her, she came out from behind Xiao Yenru, bowed to Xiao Wanru respectfully, and then stood behind Xiao Yenru obediently. Her etiquette and behavior were impeccable. "Okay, as long as big sister doesn't mind Qing's rough hands and feet." Xiao Wanru agreed readily and asked Chu Lu, who was at the door, to call Qing who was in the yard, in. Seeing Qing who looked young and a little naive, Xiao Yenru was very satisfied. She declined Xiao Wanru's kindness and went to the door of the main room with Shuqi and Qing. Shuqi took out the key and opened the door. A stuffy smell came in. Xiao Yenru waited outside, while Shuqi and Qing went in and opened the window at the back. Xiao Wanru walked to the corridor and saw Xiao Yenru standing outside the door, so she invited her with a smile, "Big sister, it will take some time to clean the main room. Why don't you have a rest here first?" "No, I'll go to see Pushun Nun." Xiao Yenru refused with a smile and said, "She taught me a lot when I was on the mountain in the past. Later, my grandma got sick and had to go down the mountain. It's rare that I have some time these days." Xiao Yenru and Pushun Nun were like Xiao Wanru and Mingqiu Nun. Although they were master and disciple, they didn't have the title of master and disciple. Since Xiao Yenru went to the mountain, she naturally should go to see Pushun Nun. "Big sister, do you want to take Shuqi there? I'll ask Chu Lu and others to help you clean the room. After a while, we can dry the room. Big sister, you can move in the evening." Xiao Wanru looked at the main room where the sound of cleaning came from and said with a smile, "No, let Shuqi and Qing clean the room together. Shuqi knows some of my habits. I used to live in the Yuhui nunnery for a period of time, so I'm not so delicate. Besides, it's not far from Pushun Nun's silence room. I'll go by myself." Xiao Yenru waved her hand and turned to walk out of the courtyard. Her attitude was still as gentle as jade. Anyone who heard her would think that this first Miss Xiao was not only not delicate, but also had a good character. She was really a rare miss from an aristocratic family. With a smile on her face, Xiao Wanru didn't persuade her anymore. After Xiao Yenru left, she turned back to the main room in the middle. She was sure that Xiao Yenru wanted her silence room. Now that she had no idea, she moved into the main room. Did she really not want anything else, or did she have other plans, or was she trying to force her out of the silence room? Xiao Yenru went to Pushun Nun's silence room alone. All the nuns she met along the way smiled at the first Miss Xiao and put their palms together. The first Miss Xiao had lived in the Yuhui nunnery for a period of time and sent some gifts to the nuns in the nunnery from time to time. From time to time, she sent some gifts to the nuns in the nunnery. All the nuns in the Yuhui nunnery had a good impression of her. Along the way, when she entered the courtyard where Pushun Nun's meditation room was located, she met Hui Qing, who was coming out of it. Xiao Yenru stopped at once and looked at Hui Qing with a smile. First Miss. Hui Qing was very excited to see Xiao Yenru coming alone. Xiao Yenru reached out to press her hand and said with an increasingly gentle smile, "Hui Qing Nun, you've been wronged. I apologize to Hui Qing Nun on behalf of my fifth sister." As she said, she took out a pouch from her sleeve and handed it to Hui Qing Nun. "I heard that Hui Qing Nun's sister is sick. I don't have anything good to give her, so please give this to her. If she wants to eat or use anything, she can buy it herself." Hui Qing took the pouch and pinched it. There was a thin piece of paper inside. She immediately knew that it was a banknote. She was overjoyed and said, "Thank you, First Miss Xiao. Those things have nothing to do with First Mississippi. After all, she is First Miss's cousin." It doesn't matter if I suffer some grievances. Is Pushun Nun in the meditation room? Xiao Yenru pointed inside and asked. Yes. Master mentioned First Miss just now and said that it was not convenient for First Miss to come today. I didn't expect First Miss to come. Master will be very happy to see you. Huiqing Nun said with a smile. She stepped aside and gestured inside with her hand. Just now, Master had made it clear that if First Miss Xiao came over, she could just come in. Xiao Yenru nodded slightly, entered the courtyard, and went to the meditation room in the middle. Huiqing Nun put the pouch in her bosom, turned to the gate of the courtyard, and stood in the shadow of the tree to guard skillfully. When Master and First Miss Xiao talked in private, they didn't want others to disturb them. In the past, when First Miss Xiao was on the mountain, every time she came to see Master, she would guard like this. Nun. Xiao Yenru pushed open the door of the meditation room. The room was very clean, with only a few rush cushions, a few scriptures, a desk, and 2 chairs. Pushun Nun was sitting cross-legged on the rush cushion, gently knocking on the wooden fish and chanting the scriptures. Hearing Xiao Yenru's voice, she only nodded and continued chanting the scriptures with her eyes closed. Xiao Yenru looked around, found a rush cushion, and sat down cross-legged. She closed her eyes and quietly listened to Pushun Nun's chanting. Pushun Nun was very skilled in chanting and knocked on the wooden fish from time to time. Xiao Yenru's heart also calmed down, and the restlessness caused by Xiao Wanru just now slowly calmed down. Chapter 5:13. Nun, do you think I should be careful? Xiao Yenru frowned and stared at Pushun Nun, who looked kind. In the smoke of the incense burner, Pushun Nun's face was not so clear. The only thing that could be clearly seen was her face, which was as kind and peaceful as the Buddha statue on the throne. Do you feel uneasy or have something to ask? Pushun Nun said with a smile. Xiao Yenru shook her head first, and then nodded. Nun, can you help me solve my doubts? No. Pushun Nun said with an increasingly gentle smile. She looked more kind and peaceful than the Buddha sitting on the throne. First Miss, you actually have the answer in your heart, don't you? Xiao Yenru fell silent for a while and then said again, Nun, I can help you, but you have to help me too. If you help me, you will help the world. All the deities and Buddhas will protect you. If it is not the mercy of Buddhism, First Miss, you can just say it. Pushun Nun said. Nun, I help you because you are the one who made the condition. If it was someone else, it would have nothing to do with me. Moreover, if someone finds out, I may get into trouble. Nun, I'm just one of the mortals, and I can't be as broad-minded as you. But if you can help me, I can help you with something. Xiao Yenru suddenly calmed down, and the irritation in her eyes faded. She looked at Pushun Nun leisurely and said. Seeing that Pushun Nun was speechless, she put down the teacup in her hand and was about to stand up. If you can't think it through, you can think about it again. I'll stay on the mountain for 3 days. After 3 days, I can't do anything even if I want to. In fact, even if she agreed 1 day later, it would be very hasty and easy to be discovered. On this point, Xiao Yenru was not worried that Pushun Nun would not agree at all. She was kind enough to save a few poor girls, even at the cost of her own life. Because she really didn't believe this idea. Even though Pushun Nun seemed to be compassionate, she still didn't believe it. Seeing that Xiao Yenru really pushed the teacup away and stood up to leave, Pushun Nun said slowly, First Miss, how can I help you? It's not urgent. Let's talk about it after Nun enters the imperial palace. Xiao Yenru said with a slight smile and looked back calmly. She was sure that she could win this round. I was the one who helped you enter the palace once, and I did it again this time. You just have to remember that you owe me twice. I'm doing this for all living beings. Pushun Nun didn't answer. She just lowered her head, put her palms together, and murmured. I'm also one of the living beings. Besides, I'm your disciple. If you help me, it's the same as helping yourself. What do you think? Xiao Yenru said with a smile in a good mood. as if she knew what she meant. "Let's do as first Miss says." Pushun Nun nodded and lowered her head even more. She began to chant slowly, and her charming chanting filled the meditation room. Xiao Yenru knew that it was time to leave. She turned around and walked out of the meditation room slowly. The religious rite in the afternoon should begin. Hearing the footsteps leave, Pushun Nun kept reciting scriptures, slowly closed her eyes, and looked at Xiao Yenru's back with deep eyes. After a long time, a weird smile appeared on her face. Xiao Yenru's promise was obviously not enough. Pushun Nun needed more. It was still early when Xiao Wanru returned to the hall where the religious rite was held. After she knelt down on the rush cushion on one side, old madam and a group of people also appeared. After everyone offered incense together, Xiao Wanru and her younger brother were left to kneel in the middle of the hall, and the others went to the side hall to rest. Xiao Wanru and her younger brother were the direct descendants of heir of Duke Xing and Infanta Qinghua, so it was normal for them to kneel in place of others. Pushun Nun also stayed here to chant scriptures with her 2 disciples. In the afternoon, after 3 rounds of burning incense, old madam came in 3 times with other people of Duke Xing's mansion and offered 3 sticks of incense. After Pushun Nun chanted scriptures 3 times, she left, leaving only Xiao Wanru and her younger brother in the hall. There was no one else here now, so they could have a rest. Xiao Wanru sat on the ground and gently tapped her legs with her hands. Xiao Yuanhao also followed her and sat down. Xiao Wanru lowered her voice and asked, How are you doing in my maternal grandma's mansion?" It was not until this moment that they had time to whisper. "Sister, don't worry. My maternal grandma is very good and has taught me a lot. Sometimes she takes me to Prince Chen's mansion, and Prince Chen also teaches me." Xiao Yuanhao had been close to Xiao Wanru before. Although they hadn't seen each other, they had been writing to each other. Hearing Xiao Wanru's words, he hurriedly looked around and said in a low voice, "You still go to Prince Chen's mansion?" Xiao Wanru was stunned. "Why not? Cousin Prince Chen is very kind. Sometimes he teaches me when he is sick." Xiao Yuanhao said. "He teaches you himself?" Xiao Wanru became more and more surprised. It was said that Prince Chen couldn't even get up from the bed. What the hell was this cousin? When did her younger brother become so close to Chu Luchen? Now he even called him elder brother. Although the 2 families could call each other in this way, the prince was noble, so he couldn't be called that at will. "Of course, cousin Prince Chen teaches me himself. Prince Chen is not in good health, but when he asks me to go there, he can bear it and teach me for a while." Xiao Yuanhao's little face tightened with respect. Xiao Wanru suddenly had a feeling that her younger brother had been cheated by others, but he was still helping others to earn money. She felt inexplicably uncomfortable in her heart. "Sister, I've grown up and become sensible. I'll protect you in the future." Looking at Xiao Wanru, who looked hesitant, Xiao Yuanhao said like an adult and reached out to massage Xiao Wanru's legs. "Your hand's strength is quite strong." Xiao Wanru widened her eyes in surprise and said. Her legs were sore and numb, and his strength was even stronger than before. "Of course. Cousin Prince Chen has asked someone to teach me martial arts. He said that on the one hand, I can strengthen my body, and on the other hand, I can protect you." Xiao Yuanhao raised his head proudly and said. Of course, he would not mention that when he first learned martial arts, he cried so much that he almost overturned the roof. At that time, Rui, a great elder princess, felt so distressed that she almost said, "I quit." However, Prince Chen directly asked the guards to throw him onto the branch and let him get down by himself. Xiao Yuanhao, whose legs and hands were trembling, was terrified at that time. Thinking of it now, he felt it was quite funny. Now he was sensible and knew that if he hadn't studied hard at that time, he would still be a little playboy who knew nothing. From this point of view, Xiao Yuanhao admired cousin Prince Chen from the bottom of his heart. Xiao Wanru really didn't know that her brother's calmness had something to do with Chu Luchen. Feeling inexplicably warm in her heart, she reached out to hold Xiao Yuanhao's hand, which was still knocking her leg. Looking him up and down, she was very satisfied and said, "You've grown so tall. You're almost as tall as you, sister." Xiao Wanru had also grown very fast recently. Compared with 2 years ago, she was more than 1 head taller. Although she still looked a little childish now, she was still young. Her 14th birthday would be in a few days. Cousin Prince Chin said that I would grow very tall in the future, so tall that I could be much taller than you. Sister, you're too short. You've grown so big, but you're still so short. Xiao Yuanhao said with extreme disgust. Xiao Wanru felt that she wanted to grind her teeth and her teeth were a little itchy. She reached out to pat Xiao Yuanhao's head gently and said angrily, "Why don't you grow taller now? You're not as tall as me, but you're so arrogant." Sister, I'm not as old as you are. If I reach that age, I will definitely be taller than you. Cousin Prince Chin said that my father is very tall. I guess you can't grow up now. Xiao Yuanhao looked Xiao Wanru up and down with a serious expression and a childish face, and then made a conclusion. His cousin Prince Chin had told him that his sister was short. Thinking of his sister's height, which was not high even among girls, Xiao Yuanhao felt that his sister was wronged. He stuck out his chest and said, "Sister, don't worry. Even if you're not tall, I won't despise you." Xiao Wanru couldn't help laughing. She reached out to pat Xiao Yuanhao again and said, "How dare you despise me? I haven't despised you yet." After a few words, they immediately felt close to each other, as if they had been living like this for more than 2 years. They couldn't help chuckling at each other. "Fifth Miss, kneel down. Third young master, old madam invites you to come over." Suddenly, an old maid's cold voice came from the door. Xiao Wanru frowned. When she was about to speak, Xiao Yuanhao said, "Why only me but not sister? Someone has to guard the Buddha hall." "It's suitable for the 5th miss to guard here," the old maid said at the door of the hall. Xiao Yuanhao still wanted to say something, but Xiao Wanru reached out to stop him and winked at him, indicating that he should not talk back. Xiao Yuanhao nodded with a sullen face and said, "You go first. My legs are sore. I'll come over after cleaning up." "Yes, I'll report it to old madam right away." The old maid answered and left. "Sister, does grandma still dislike you?" Xiao Yuanhao lowered his voice and asked discontentedly, "It's not easy for you to come back. Why doesn't grandma like you?" Obviously, his sister was more likable. Why didn't grandma like his sister? Why did grandma ask someone to guard the Buddha hall and anyone could come over to take her place? Why did she have to keep his sister here? Now Xiao Yuanhao was no longer the ignorant Xiao Yuanhao who only knew how to fool around. He was very angry about grandma's partiality. "How? Don't be angry. There's nothing to be angry about. You were not raised by her, so you don't have any feelings for her. How? You should remember that you were raised by her. Don't make her angry. You should coax old madam. Otherwise, the things left by father and mother may be lost. The so-called things that they could not keep, such as the screen wall, the title of nobility, and some other things that they cared about, were all snatched away by the second branch in their previous life, trampling on their blood and flesh." Xiao Yuanhao was still young, so Xiao Wanru was not willing to say some words clearly, but her eyes were cold and hostile. Chapter 5:14. Laughter came from the side hall, which could be heard in the quiet main hall. Xiao Wanru could tell that old madam was very happy now. Obviously, Hao-er's words made old madam very happy. Xiao Wanru raised the corners of her pink and tender lips silently with a bit of sarcasm. In the last life, Hao had been lost and his whereabouts were unknown. It was said that old madam had found someone at first, but after a month, there was no news. Old madam liked and doted on Hao-er. But if she didn't, it could be replaced. She had so many grandchildren, so it didn't matter if 1 or 2 were missing. Moreover, As old Madam of Duke Xing's mansion, she really didn't think that she didn't know how to raise when he was a child. That kind of way of raising a disabled person was absolutely not good to a child. Xiao Wanru felt lucky at this time. Fortunately, she had revealed her identity early in this life and sent to her grandma. When Xiao Yuanhao came back, he came to offer incense with old madam and others. This was the last incense in the afternoon. After offering incense, Xiao Yanru looked at the sky outside and said softly, "Fifth brother, you can go down the mountain first. The people sent by Rui and great elder princess are waiting outside." "I won't go. I want to stay with fifth sister." Xiao Yuanhao hesitated for a moment. Looking at Xiao Wanru, who was still kneeling on the rush cushion, he tightened his face and said worriedly. Xiao Wanru had to keep watch tonight and couldn't go back to rest until midnight. "Nonsense. As a boy, you'd better go back at night." Old Madam rebuked him unhappily. It was not that the Yuhui nunnery didn't keep male guests, but it basically didn't. After all, it was a nunnery. Although Xiao Yuanhao was still young, there was a rule that boys and girls should not eat together at the age of 7. Obviously, he had exceeded the age limit. "Third brother, you can go down the mountain. I will help fifth sister to keep watch tonight." Xiao Yanru persuaded him gently as usual. "How? You can go down the mountain?" Xiao Wanru also knew that it was not appropriate for Xiao Yuanhao to stay, so she said softly. "But..." Xiao Yuanhao was still a little dissatisfied. He pursed his lips and wanted to say something, but was interrupted by old madam. "Go down the mountain. Your eldest brother will go down the mountain later. You two can be companions." Seeing that Madame Dowager had made up her mind, Xiao Yuanhao had no choice but to agree. He bowed to Madame Dowager with his manservant and walked out together with Xiao Hua then. "Grandma, you should also go to have a rest. You have been guarding here all afternoon. How can you bear it?" Xiao Yanru advised. "Grandma, you should go back first. Eldest sister, fifth sister, and I are still here." Xiao Jia also tried to persuade her. Old Madam turned to look at Xiao Wanru. Xiao Wanru knelt there with a pale face. Sensing old Madam's gaze, she raised her head gently and said, "Grandma, you can go back first. I'll take care of it." "Can you do it alone?" Old Madam's face softened a little, but she didn't ask Xiao Yanru or Xiao Jia to accompany her. "Grandma, I'm fine. You can go to have a rest. Eldest sister and second sister, also go to have a rest. You just went up the mountain today and must be tired." Xiao Wanru's voice became softer and softer, but there was a trace of sarcasm in her eyes. Her words sounded nice, but in fact, they were just words. How could anyone really stay to keep watch at night? "I'm not tired. I'll stay to accompany fifth sister," Xiao Yanru said with a gentle and concerned look, as if she was sincere. As she said, she knelt down. Unexpectedly, as soon as she bent her knees, she knelt down heavily with a plop. Miss, be careful. You hit your knees when you knelt down just now." A maid hurriedly squatted down and gently rubbed her knees while reminding her in a low voice. "Nonsense. Why are you still kneeling when you are injured? Help the first miss to have a rest." Old Madam's face turned cold and she scolded, "It's not the time to show filial piety to your eldest uncle. As long as you have the intention, it's enough. Don't try to make a scene." Therefore, staying here was not necessarily filial piety, but just an excuse for others to leave. Xiao Wanru sneered in her heart. This pair of grandmother and granddaughter were really disgusting. They had said all the good and bad things in a comprehensive manner. Big sister, let me help you back." Xiao Jia rolled her eyes and squeezed to Xiao Yanru's side to curry favor with her. Of course, she didn't want to stay to keep watch until midnight. It was so tiring. She just said that to curry favor with Xiao Yanru. Now that Xiao Yanru was going back, there was no reason for her to stay here. "Second sister, stay to accompany fifth sister. After I go back and rub the wound on my knees, I'll come to accompany you. Xiao Yanru gently pushed Xiao Jia away. Jia, stay here. Ru, go back to have a rest. If you don't have a good rest today, how can you show filial piety to your eldest uncle tomorrow? Old Madam looked at the huge hall and couldn't say that she wanted Xiao Wanru to stay here alone. Moreover, she didn't care much about Xiao Jia, in the past. Xiao Jia, was just a daughter of concubine who didn't care, so it was reasonable for her to stay here with Xiao Wanru. It was one thing that she didn't like Infanta Qinghua, but this religious rite was also held for her son. It was good for one more person to stay here. Since old Madam had made up her mind, the others didn't dare to say anything more. Xiao Yanru was helped away. Seeing them leave, Xiao Jia, was so angry that her face turned livid. She rolled her eyes at old Madam's back with hatred. It was obvious that old Madam was partial. According to the rule, the younger generation should stay to keep watch tonight, but now only she and Xiao Wanru were left. She was really unwilling. However, no matter how unwilling she was, Xiao Jia, was very clear about her identity. She was a daughter of concubine who was not engaged. This marriage was completely in the hands of Madam of Duke Xing. Old Madam would not care about her, a daughter of concubine. Thinking of this, Xiao Jia, didn't dare to be too presumptuous. She stared at the backs of the people who were far away unwillingly, turned around, and came back to the hall. She collapsed on a rush cushion and ordered the servant girl beside her, "Go and find me a glass of water. I'm thirsty." The servant girl hurriedly turned back to the side hall to fetch it. After Xiao Jia, took a few sips, she put the cup aside casually and ordered, "Where's the dinner? It's already so late. Haven't you had dinner yet?" "I'm starving." "I'm going to ask her now." The servant girl hurriedly left again. At this time, Pushun Nun and her 2 disciples also finished chanting scriptures. Pushun Nun handed a scroll of scriptures to Yujia and said, "Ask 2nd Miss and 5th Miss to chant scriptures every once in a while in the evening. They don't need to chant too much, just 2 or 3 times." This was the rule, and Yujia naturally understood it. She had prepared such religious rites with the master of Jingxin Monastery many times before. She immediately took it respectfully and nodded. Pushun Nun stood up and left with her 2 disciples. It was getting dark outside at this time. It was not only dark at night, but also gloomy as if it was going to rain. It was already autumn, but the weather was so gloomy that it seemed to be contained in a thunderstorm. The gloomy weather made people extremely uncomfortable. What the hell is this weather? If I had known it, I wouldn't have gone up the mountain. Sitting on the rush cushion, Yujia, squinted at Xiao Wanru and complained coldly. Xiao Wanru ignored her. "Hey, you keep watch later. I'll sleep for a while. Wake me up when it's time." Seeing that Xiao Wanru ignored her, Xiao Jia, frowned and sneered. Xiao Wanru didn't seem to hear her scolding. She opened the scriptures handed over by Yujia, picked up a wooden fish, and began to chant scriptures while knocking on it. The sound of chanting scriptures in a low voice sounded in the Buddha hall, sounding a little peaceful. However, Xiao Jia, felt that she had been ignored. She walked up to Xiao Wanru, looked down at Xiao Wanru, and said with a snort, "What nonsense are you chanting? If you don't know how to chant, don't chant it." After saying that, she kicked the wooden fish in front of Xiao Wanru and immediately knocked it over. Although she was not favored in Duke Xing's mansion, she was more authentic than this outsider. She was full of disdain for Xiao Wanru in front of her. How could an outsider, who was forced to stay in the mansion, have any future? Her concubine had said that even if Xiao Wanru died outside, no one in the mansion would be sad. At most, they would just put on an act and ask for peace after death. Suddenly, she felt a pain in her foot as if she had been hit by something. Xiao Jia, cried out in pain and knelt on the ground with a flop. "Xiao Wanru, you bitch, what did you hit me with?" "I." Xiao Jia, screamed, but then her voice got stuck in her throat. She looked at Xiao Wanru in front of her in disbelief and froze, not daring to move at all. Beside her neck was a wooden stick used to knock the wooden fish. One end was a bead, and the other was a little sharp, but not sharp. However, when this sharp end was pressed against her neck, Xiao Jia did not dare to test whether it was sharp or not. Xiao Jia's clothes were held by Xiao Wanru, and her neck was pressed against by the wooden stick in her hand. Although Xiao Jia was a little older than Xiao Wanru and Xiao Wanru still looked a little childish in front of her, Xiao Jia did not dare to move at all. Xiao Jia's neck was stiff and pointed. Her watery eyes, which should have been a little charming, were cold with a bit of hostility. Xiao Jia had never felt such hostility from anyone. She was so scared that she almost burst into tears. Fifth sister, you can talk nicely, don't use this. Yujia stammered with her face turning pale with fear. Do you think I'm easy to bully? Xiao Wanru said softly. In the past, such a soft voice would definitely make Xiao Jia feel that the person in front of her was easy to bully. But in the current situation, Xiao Jia had already been scared out of her wits. She kept shaking her head and said in a crying tone, Fifth sister, I didn't bully you. I'll stay up at night with you. I'll stay up at night with you. In the end, Xiao Jia felt that she was really going to cry. She had never expected that Xiao Wanru would be so ruthless that she pressed herself against the wall without saying a word. Chapter 5:15. There was no one else around, and her servant girl was not there either. The only servant girl was Xiao Wanru's, who was staring at her fiercely, making her more afraid to move. Yujia, give me a hairpin. Xiao Wanru said slowly. Yujia neatly inserted the only bamboo hairpin on her head, which was made by herself. The pointy hairpin was much sharper than the one Xiao Wanru used to knock the small wooden fish just now. Fifth sister, I really didn't mean it. I won't do it again. I won't dare to do it again. Xiao Jia really burst into tears. Looking at the sharp hairpin, she broke out in a cold sweat. If she had known Xiao Wanru's character, she would have been courting death to be so arrogant in front of her. You don't dare to do it again? Xiao Wanru said coldly. Yes. I don't dare to do it again. I won't dare to do it again. Fifth sister, I won't dare to do it again. Xiao Jia almost cried out of control. Xiao Wanru didn't say anything and just looked at Xiao Jia gloomily. Xiao Jia trembled all over and her face turned pale. Only then did she feel that her neck was loosened and she was pushed away by Xiao Wanru. Xiao Jia's neck was loosened, and her clothes were loosened. She rolled and crawled to the bottom of the Buddha's altar, hugged one of the Buddha's legs, and cried sadly. She was really frightened. How could a girl who looked so delicate do such a thing and do such a cruel thing? Yujia took the wooden fish that she had kicked over and put it in front of Xiao Wanru. She put the hairpin in her hand on her head and inserted it neatly. Xiao Wanru ignored Xiao Jia, who was crying sadly, picked up the wooden fish and knocked it slowly and rhythmically. Second miss, you'd better shut up. Don't provoke my master again. Yujia looked at Xiao Jia coldly and said. Xiao Jia was so scared that she even stopped crying. She just sobbed silently and glanced at Xiao Wanru from time to time. Xiao Wanru looked like a normal miss from an aristocratic family, gentle, but it was all fake. She might become a fierce beast at any time. Thinking that she would have to stay with this fierce beast in human skin until midnight tonight, Xiao Jia felt that the fake polite words she had said to Xiao Yenru before were really mean. She had followed old madam without saying anything at that time, so there would not have been such a thing. Now she was really frightened to be with Xiao Wanru. But now she didn't dare to leave. Originally, she wanted to pretend to obey old madam and sleep here for a while. Seeing that it was almost time, she could leave early. Anyway, it seemed that old madam wouldn't ask too much about what happened tonight. But now, She didn't dare to do that. She just hid aside and hoped that Xiao Wanru didn't see her. When the maid, Liu Xiang, came back, she saw her master silently hugging one side of the Buddha's leg and crying silently. Miss, what's wrong? Liu Xiang was shocked and rushed over to hug her. Xiao Jia reached out to cover Liu Xiang's mouth and stole a glance at Xiao Wanru. Seeing that Xiao Wanru was still chanting scriptures and didn't notice her, Xiao Jia breathed a sigh of relief and said in a low voice, "Shut up. Do you want to disturb eldest uncle and eldest aunt?" Second miss. Liu Xiang looked at Xiao Jia in front of her in astonishment. She didn't understand why her master was so respectful to this illusory eldest uncle and eldest aunt in such a short time. Shut up. Xiao Jia scolded Xiao Wanru in a low voice while secretly looking at her. She was afraid that this girl would accidentally annoy Xiao Wanru and get herself into trouble. Miss, do you want to have dinner? Liu Xiang was at a loss. She looked at Xiao Wanru and simply stopped thinking about it. She also asked in a low voice. Go and ask fifth miss if she wants to have dinner. Xiao Jia hesitated for a moment, pushed Liu Xiang and said. She didn't dare to eat alone. Miss, there's only one serving. I just took one for you. I asked the kitchen to make it before. There's also your favorite osmanthus cake. Liu Xiang became more and more confused. She had always been very clear about her master's character. She had always looked down on the fifth miss, who had been admitted into the family. When did she take care of the fifth miss so much? Moreover, when she left just now, her master didn't ask her to help the fifth miss take the dinner. It had only been a short time, but her master was so enthusiastic to make friends with the fifth miss. Just do it. Don't talk nonsense. Xiao Jia said with a little anger out of shame. Liu Xiang had to stand up, go to Xiao Wanru and say, Fifth miss, dinner is here. Here they are. Would you like some? My master doesn't need it. Let second miss use it. Yu Jia shook her hand at Liu Xiang and said. Oh. Looking at the fifth miss, who ignored her, and then at the second miss, who was secretly looking at her in the corner, Liu Xiang felt that something seemed wrong. It should be the other way around, right? Seeing Xiao Jia waving at her, Liu Xiang took the food basket back. Put it here. I'll eat it first. Fifth sister, someone will bring it here later. Yu Jia breathed a sigh of relief. Since Xiao Wanru didn't need it, she couldn't blame her. Liu Xiang nodded, picked up the lid of the food basket, and was about to take the plate out. Wait a minute, let's go to the side. Xiao Jia pulled her hand and said. Liu Xiang looked around. This was already the farthest side. She didn't know where there was another side. Go behind that door. Xiao Jia just wanted to stay far away from Xiao Wanru now. She couldn't let Xiao Wanru find her little tricks. After looking around and finding no one, she looked up and suddenly saw the wide door of the hall. She was overjoyed. She wiped away her tears and took the lead to walk quietly to the door of the hall. Hiding behind the door, she could not only stay away from Xiao Wanru, but also prevent Xiao Wanru from seeing her directly. Liu Xiang followed Xiao Jia over and took out the plates one by one. Seeing her master eating, she felt more and more strange. Was it really her master who ate quietly and didn't dare to make any sound? Miss, what's wrong with you? Liu Xiang felt that the person in front of her was not her master. Otherwise, why did she seem to be a different person? Don't speak. Xiao Jia lowered her voice and said angrily. Liu Xiang really didn't dare to speak at this time. She just looked at Xiao Jia silently. After Xiao Jia finished her dinner, she carefully cleaned up. Then she saw her master carefully kneel on the rush cushion and actually began to recite scriptures seriously. Liu Xiang felt that she really couldn't understand her master today. The person in front of her was the most lonely fifth Mississippi. In the past, her master didn't speak kindly when she mentioned the fifth Mississippi. Moreover, There was no old madam, first miss, or even anyone else here at this time. Why was her master so cautious? Liu Xiang couldn't understand her master, so she could only take the clean dinner to the kitchen. When she came back, she saw that the fifth miss was also having dinner. Compared with her mistress, who looked sneaky and seemed to be eating secretly, this fifth miss looked much more generous. She sat down on a chair at the side and ate, with two maids serving her. Although she was just eating, her behavior was elegant and free, without any of the sneaky look on her mistress's face just now. Liu Xiang wanted to watch her again, but she was called over by Xiao Jia, to recite scriptures with her. Xiao Wanru glanced at Xiao Jia, coldly and raised the corners of her mouth slightly. She wiped her mouth with a handkerchief, asked Chu Lu to take the food basket back, and then knelt down again and began to recite scriptures. After reciting for a while, Yujia asked her to take a rest and she helped her recite scriptures. Compared with Xiao Wanru, Yujia recited scriptures much more smoothly. Whether it was the way she knocked on the wooden fish or the voice she recited scriptures, there was a very natural charm. Xiao Wanru took a rest. After a day's work, she was indeed tired. Her legs and feet were numb. She sat down sideways and reached out to knock on her legs. Seeing Xiao Wanru stop, Xiao Jia, immediately stopped, followed Xiao Wanru's movements, and carefully peeped at Xiao Wanru. Xiao Wanru didn't care about Xiao Jia's peeping at her at all. Her eyes fell on the door of the hall outside and she frowned tightly. Just now, when Chu Lu came over, she said that she didn't meet anyone on the way here. Although it was getting late and there seemed to be a rainstorm coming, it was really strange that there were no nuns here at this time. The religious rite was still going on. Some people of the main family stayed here, so there should be 1 or 2 nuns outside. Why didn't she meet anyone? Did they happen to leave or something else? Just in case, she had asked Chu Lu to call Qing. Chu Lu had told her before that Qing was driven out after cleaning for an afternoon and said that some of Xiao Yanru's maids could do the cleaning. A muffled thunder suddenly exploded, as if it had exploded in a corner of the Buddha hall. Xiao Jia, who had been peeping at Liu Xiang with a tense mood, was so frightened that she let out a cry, trembled all over, and hugged Liu Xiang, who was still chanting scriptures. Liu Xiang was also startled and hugged Xiao Jia. For some unknown reason, one of the lamps in the Buddhist temple went out, and the entire Buddhist temple darkened by a layer. Miss Yujia suddenly stood beside Xiao Wanru and looked at the extinguished Buddha lamp with a stern face. The lamp oil was gone. The lamp oil was gone. So many people had taken care of it for a day, but they didn't even add the lamp oil. Miss, the lamp over there is about to go out. Yujia glanced at the other lamps and said in a low voice. There were a total of 10 lamps in front of the Buddha. Now that one lamp had gone out, there were 9 lamps left. Xiao Wanru stood up and looked at the other 9 lamps. Each of them seemed to be about to go out. There was a trace of deepness in her watery eyes. Someone had planned it. Another thunder exploded. 2 lamps couldn't stand it and went out. Xiao Jia screamed again in fear and hugged Liu Xiang. Shut up if you don't want to die. The cold reprimand seemed to carry the heavy breath of the night, which made Xiao Jia suppress her crying voice tightly at the bottom of her throat. Chapter 5:16. Xiao Wanru's clothes were not heavy, but they were rainproof with a hat. Yujia and Qing helped Xiao Wanru put them on. Xiao Jia hid in a corner, shivering and looking pitiful. Leave now before it rains. Xiao Wanru said coldly. Xiao Jia was stunned at first, and then suddenly came to her senses. Looking at the dim Buddhist lamp, she pulled Liu Xiang and turned to run. Even if she was inexperienced, she had found that this was not a peaceful place. If there is anything, go to the east, keep going east. Xiao Wanru's voice came from behind. Xiao Jia nodded hard, sobbed and subconsciously obeyed Xiao Wanru's words. After going out, she went directly to the east door with Liu Xiang. To the east was actually to the meditation room where the nuns lived. There were a large number of rooms where the nuns used to live. There might be no one in other places, but there must be someone there. Xiao Wanru had put on her clothes. "Miss, please leave with Yujie. I'll follow you later." Qing, who had already restrained her childishness, said anxiously. Just now, when Chulu came back and said, she knew that something was wrong, so she immediately came over with her rain gear. Now the situation was unclear, so she only hoped that her master could get her news and come over as soon as possible. "Miss and I should also hide here." Yujie looked at the rumbling thunder outside and said. "No, we must leave." Qing, said anxiously. The thunder outside was shocking, and it was easy for something to go wrong at this time. "Let's go." Xiao Wanru nodded, clenched her cold head, and immediately walked out. Suddenly, another Buddhist lamp went out. After rushing into the darkness to identify the direction, Xiao Wanru also went east. The whole Yuhui nunnery was in darkness, and there was thunder. No one knew what would happen next. The abnormality in the hall also made her feel that it must be extremely dangerous today. A trace of cold light flashed across her watery eyes. Who did it? Yujie followed Xiao Wanru closely, helping her to open the way and holding her hand. In the darkness, they could not see clearly. From time to time, they bumped into something, and Yujie stood in front of them. Qing, stayed behind. Xiao Wanru composed herself and looked back. In such a dark night, even someone who was familiar with the route might not be able to find her. After making sure of the east direction, Xiao Wanru continued to run forward. In the thunder, the rain finally came. However, with a loud rumbling sound, a corner of the hall was on fire. It seemed that the thunder had hit the Yuhui nunnery and then set it on fire. The fire suddenly rose to the sky, and even the heavy rain could not get through. Xiao Wanru stopped and turned to look. It was a Buddha hall with high eaves. It was obviously the Buddha hall where she had been before. If she were still in it now, she would not have been able to escape and could even have died early. No one knew how they died when they were burned by the heavenly fire. "Miss." Yujie also gasped and said in horror. "Go." Xiao Wanru crooked her cold finger, turned around and said. When she was about to move forward, she was suddenly pulled behind a big tree by Yujie. There were more than one footsteps in front of them. She heard someone saying, "Find them. You must find them." The voice was low and cold. Even though she had been reborn, Xiao Wanru did not expect that she would encounter such a thing today. She gritted her teeth and held Yujie's hand tightly. The two of them leaned against the wet tree motionlessly, for fear of making any noise. Someone guessed what they were thinking and knew that they were going to the east where there were many people. Another bolt of lightning flashed in the darkness. This time, Xiao Wanru clearly saw a few black shadows appear at the door of the moon cave. She subconsciously clenched her hands and trembled slightly. "Everyone, scatter and search. Take them away as soon as you find them." The black-clad man who had spoken before said again. Several black shadows scattered, while the remaining people searched the nearby corners step by step. A black-clad man was about to come here. "Miss, change the direction. I'll go out first." Yujie whispered in Xiao Wanru's ear. Before Xiao Wanru could answer, she suddenly rushed out from behind the tree and ran into the darkness. The black-clad men who were searching for Xiao Wanru immediately realized it and chased after them one by one. Xiao Wanru's tears fell down, mixed with the rain, and slid into the corners of her mouth. She knew what Yujie meant. Yujie asked her to distract the black-clad men and give her a way out. This was the best time to leave, but she still leaned against the tree motionlessly, almost merging with it. Sure enough, after a long time, she saw a black-clad man appear behind a rock. After shaking for a while, he turned around and went elsewhere. It was obvious that he was going to search elsewhere. Seeing the black-clad man leave, Xiao Wanru breathed a sigh of relief. She looked at the way she came, gritted her teeth, and turned to go back. At this time, it was not safe to go anywhere. Obviously, these people came to find her and would not give up until they found her. She could only meet Qing on the way back. Since Qing was sent by Chu Luchen, she would not fall into the trap so easily. Moreover, the fire rising in the hall should alarm all the people in the Yuhui nunnery. Someone should come to put out the fire. If there were more people, the black-clad men would not dare to act rashly, no matter whose subordinates they were. Of course, it was also dangerous. If she was found by the black-clad men before others found her, it would be even more dangerous. However, she had no better way at the moment. She bet that those people would not recognize the clothes she was wearing at once. This raincoat was brought by Qing for her. It was dark green, which had a good concealment function in the dark. It was completely different from the plain white clothes she had worn before. At first glance, they looked like two completely different sets of clothes. She could not tell the direction in the dark, so she went straight to the place where the fire rose. There was no one around her except for her own footsteps, which were accompanied by bursts of dense thunder. After the thunder, there was lightning. In the lightning and thunder, Xiao Wanru's figure appeared and disappeared from time to time. Suddenly, there came the sound of hurried footsteps behind her. Xiao Wanru looked back in a hurry and saw a black-clad man appear behind the door behind her. When she was about to stop, a flash of lightning suddenly flashed, and the two of them immediately met each other's eyes. After the flash of lightning, Xiao Wanru hurriedly hid in the rockery on the side. She carefully lifted the corner of her dress and did not dare to make any sound, for fear of disturbing the black-clad man. The black-clad man was stunned for a moment when he saw someone here. He hurriedly turned around and came in Xiao Wanru's direction. Just now, he saw clearly that it was a beautiful girl. Even under the pouring rain, she still looked delicate and charming. It was the first time in his life that he had seen such a beautiful girl. "Come out. I see you." The black-clad man stood at the intersection where Xiao Wanru had stood before, lowered his voice and said coldly. Xiao Wanru did not dare to move, leaned against the rockery, pulled out the hairpin from her head, and pointed the sharp hairpin outside. She tried to calm down and figure out the possibility of the black-clad man coming over. There were some mountain rocks and a few big trees in the surroundings. However, if someone were to hide, this fake mountain would be the most conspicuous. The man in black seemed to have discovered his hiding place and was walking towards him with steady footsteps. Xiao Wanru's heart beat wildly and almost jumped out of her chest. She tried hard to suppress her breathing, for fear that the black-clad man would find her exact location. The heavy rain was still falling, but it did not cover up the sound. After hearing some of the sounds, he squatted down and felt a stone under his feet. It seemed to be more reassuring than the hairpin. He carefully picked up the big sharp stone and held it over his head. He waited quietly in the darkness, listening to the footsteps slowly approaching in the darkness. The black-clad man stood cautiously at the entrance of the rockery and said with a smile, "Little beauty, come out. If you follow me, you will be able to live a good life." Although he had only caught a glimpse of the girl just now, he knew that she was definitely a beautiful woman, especially when she was in such a sorry state. It was unknown whether it was rainwater or tears on her delicate face, but with just a glance, it was enough to make one's heart ache to the bone. That pear blossom in the rain was so lovely and moving. The black-clothed man's eyes couldn't help but reveal a lustful light. Xiao Wanru stood in the darkness, holding the stone high without moving. She did not dare to move, for fear that she would fall into the hands of the black-clad man if she was careless. "Little beauty, don't be afraid. I won't do anything to you. I will only dote on you. Don't worry and come out." The black-clad man coaxed her again. "Come out quickly. Otherwise, when I come over later, it will not be so easy to deal with you." A cold light flashed in the black-clad man's hand. It was a knife. Xiao Wanru looked more and more nervous, and her heart almost jumped out of her throat. The black-clad man called her a few more times, but there was no answer. He immediately became impatient. It was not far from the place where the hall was burning. If he continued to delay, it was very likely that he would be discovered. Although the black-clad man felt that he was not afraid of being discovered and could kill anyone he saw, he still did not want to get into more trouble. He waved the knife in his hand, walked carefully in, and said, "Little beauty, don't hide. I see you. Come out obediently, and I can still treat you well. If you dare to hide again, when I find you, I won't have tender feelings for you." The knife was right in front of Xiao Wanru, and it almost touched her body in a flash. She subconsciously threw the stone in her hand forward, almost exhausted all her strength, but still clenched the hairpin in her other hand tightly. When the stone was thrown out, the black-clad man was startled. He slapped the sharp stone to the ground with the knife in his hand, and the stone hit the ground with a heavy sound. The black-clad man cursed, stretched out his other hand, grabbed Xiao Wanru's clothes, and pulled her hard into his arms. Xiao Wanru was dragged out and staggered. "Little beauty, you'd better come over here." Another bolt of lightning flashed and pierced into the crack of the rockery. In the faint light, Xiao Wanru bit her lower lip tightly and fiercely hit the black-clad man with the hairpin in her hand. Xiao Wanru clearly knew that if she really fell into the hands of the black-clad man, she would be finished. Chapter 5:17. In the darkness, the black-clad man screamed and suddenly fell on Xiao Wanru. Xiao Wanru stepped back in a hurry and hit her head heavily on the rockery on one side. She felt dizzy and her body went limp. The hairpin in her hand had already fallen to the ground before she could do so. The expected sharp pain did not come. Her body fell into someone's arms, and she heard an anxious voice, "Zhuozhua." She slowly breathed a sigh of relief and almost fell into Chu Liuchen's arms. The courage she forced up turned into ashes at once. Another bolt of lightning flashed and clearly shone on the black-clad man lying in a pool of blood on the ground. There was a sharp dagger in his back. He was killed with one blow. It turned out that he was not stabbed to death by her hairpin. "You. Why are you here?" Xiao Wanru tried to keep calm, but her whole body was trembling. "It's okay. It's okay." Chu Liuchen said softly and reached out to hold her in his arms. He was tall and happened to hold her petite body tightly. His eyes fell on her messy clothes. There were several scratches on her clothes. Her whole body seemed to be fished out of the water. There was no clean place on her body. Even though Xiao Wanru was trying hard to hold back, he could still sense that her delicate body was trembling. He took off his cloak and held Xiao Wanru in it, revealing only her pale little face. He held Xiao Wanru in his arms and slowly bent down to walk out of the rockery. There were a few guards standing outside the rockery, including Qing Er. Seeing Chu Liuchen coming out with Xiao Wanru in his arms, Qing Er moved her feet and wanted to step forward to hold Xiao Wanru for Chu Liuchen. "Don't hold back. Kill him as soon as you see him." The gentle voice sounded gloomy and cold in the thunder. The guards scattered. Chu Liuchen hurried to the courtyard where she lived before with Qing Er following closely. Rui, a great elder princess, had lived in this courtyard before and said that she would live here all the time, so it was naturally empty. Chu Liuchen carried Xiao Wanru into the room. Qing hurriedly washed Xiao Wanru. Xiao Wanru didn't feel relieved until the warm water warmed her skin. He slowly regained his consciousness. "Qing Er, have you found Yujie?" Xiao Wanru grabbed Qing Er's hand beside the bathtub and asked in a hoarse voice. "Don't worry, Mississippi. His Highness's people have been found. Yujie should be in the quiet room over there." Qing Er comforted her hurriedly. If it wasn't for the fact that it was inconvenient for His Highness to go over, it would have been better for them to return to the quiet room. Hearing that Yujie was safe, Xiao Wanru felt relieved. She let out a long sigh of relief and let Qing Er wash her clothes. This was her residence, so there were clothes left. Qing found a set of black clothes for her and left after helping her put them on. Chu Liuchen also freshened up, pushed the door open and walked in. Your Highness, who is it? Xiao Wanru had calmed down at this time. Hearing the voice by the door, she raised her head and asked. It was obvious from the behavior of the black-clad men that they didn't know her, which meant that they didn't target her. Moreover, she didn't provoke them to deal with her in such a harsh way. Chu Luchen didn't answer her. He reached out to hold her hand and lifted her sleeve. There was a clear wound on her right arm. She didn't know where she had bumped into it or it was accidentally scratched by a branch. Chu Luchen took out a jade bottle from his bosom, poured some milky white medicinal liquid out of it, and smeared it on her hand. When the cool medicinal liquid was smeared on the hot wound, she immediately felt a kind of crisp and itchy feeling, but it was not strong and made her feel very comfortable. Chu Luchen carefully smeared the medicinal liquid for her. Xiao Wanru didn't ask any more. She lowered her watery eyes and quietly watched him push the medicinal liquid away forcefully. It was very quiet in the room, as well as outside. The thunder and lightning disappeared at some point, and it seemed that even the sound of wind and rain had disappeared. A slight sound came from outside, and someone was pushing the courtyard door open. Who came in at this time? Did Qing go out? A slight sound of careful footsteps came from outside. It was not Qing. It seemed that someone had sneaked into this place. Xiao Wanru looked up at Chu Luchen, only to find that he still smeared the medicinal liquid for her as if he didn't hear it. Even she could hear it, so how could he not hear it? After he finished smearing the medicinal liquid, Chu Luchen pulled down her sleeve, picked up the handkerchief Xiao Wanru had placed on the table, wiped his hands, and then helped Xiao Wanru stand up. He half-hugged and half-hugged her to the door. As soon as the door was opened, several men in black looked at the two people at the door in astonishment. The handsome young child and the gorgeous girl, like a pair of jade, stood quietly at the door. Their eyes were calm as if they didn't know that they were in a dangerous situation. Chu Luchen raised the corners of his mouth and wrapped his arms around her. Xiao Wanru fell into his arms, and her head was pressed against his chest. She heard Chu Liuchen's calm and gentle voice, "Don't keep them alive." After a few screams, it became silent. Xiao Wanru moved, pushed Chu Liuchen's arms away, and turned to look at the yard. The men in black, who had been standing in the yard just now, had already died on the spot. "Are you afraid?" Chu Liuchen's voice was as gentle as ever, as if the bloody azure field in front of him was not created by him. "Is it useful to be afraid?" Xiao Wanru pulled a corner of his robe hard, and then slowly raised the corners of her pale lips. There was no trace of blood on her face, but there was a hint of sarcasm in her smile. Was it useful to be afraid? Of course it was useless. In her last life, she had been living in fear and inferiority complex, but she still ended up like that. Of course it's useless. Chu Luchen looked at her quietly for a few times, suddenly smiled, took her hand, and walked down the steps slowly. The rain had stopped. He looked up into the distance and found that the fire in the hall seemed to have been extinguished. Many people's voices came. It should be that all the people who saw it went there. Walking up to a man in black, Chu Luchen put down her hand, stretched out his leg to kick the dead man in black, and said with a cold look in his eyes, "Find out who sent them and see if they are still there." His words were vague, so Xiao Wanru did not understand, but a guard behind him understood. He immediately answered and squatted down to look through it. After looking through this one, he went to look through another. "Throw these people everywhere." After the guard finished looking through it, Chu Luchen said gloomily. A few more guards came over and carried the corpses of the men in black out, disappearing into the night. The remaining two guards quickly cleaned up the yard, cleaning up the bloodstains. "Your Highness, go back quickly." Xiao Wanru had calmed down at this time. She bit her lip and said. It was extremely inappropriate for Chu Luchen to stay at this time. "I'll send you to the silence room before I leave," Chu Luchen said. He reached out to pick up Xiao Wanru, jumped directly onto the wall, found the direction, and quickly headed for Xiao Wanru's silence room. When he was about to arrive, he jumped off the wall, pointed at the road in front of him, and said, "Go in, and I'll leave. Looking at the gate of the courtyard not far away, Xiao Wanru nodded. It was not the time to talk about it in detail at this time. She immediately picked up her dress and ran to the gate of the courtyard. Because she ran fast, the mud in the wetland on the ground splashed up, dirtying the black clothes she had just changed into. Qing ran out from somewhere and followed closely behind her. She was also splashed with mud and looked embarrassed. She knocked hard on the door, and Chu Lu hurried to open the door. Seeing that it was Xiao Wanru and Qing, she breathed a sigh of relief and almost fell down with her hands on the wall. Fortunately, Miss was fine. Fortunately, Miss was fine. In the corridor, Xiao Yanru looked coldly at the embarrassed master and servant, and a trace of viciousness flashed across her eyes. She turned back to the room calmly. It had nothing to do with her. It was neither she who asked for it, nor was it someone who repaid her kindness. Even if she secretly informed some people, it had nothing to do with her. She just implicitly told others what she knew. Xiao Wanru was lucky. She was used as a shield, but nothing happened to her. It was really uncomfortable. Why didn't she die? Even if she didn't die, she should have been taken away. Those people must be blind to let go of such a little beauty. Chu Luchen watched Xiao Wanru enter the courtyard, and then Chu Lu closed the gate of the courtyard before he turned around. His eyes became gentle again, with a bit of nobility and indifference, as if he were enjoying the scenery in his own mansion at this time. Burn a few rooms on the other side of the high wall, lest the main hall is burned. Chu Luchen smiled slightly and reached out to pick a leaf beside him. Those are the former emperor's S. The guard behind him hesitated for a moment and said uneasily. They couldn't touch those rooms at will. If they were not careful, it might cause a shocking event. It doesn't matter. A few more people have to die. Only by burning more rooms can people pay more attention to them. Chu Luchen said with an increasingly gentle smile. His eyes fell on the high wall not far away, and his light lips curled up. Some people wanted to come out, and some wanted to go in. In this case, let them attract more attention together. Since they were worried about this place, they might as well open it and have an open fight. The sudden accident in the Yuhui nunnery shocked the whole capital city. The accident in the Yuhui nunnery had just happened not long ago. Unexpectedly, another accident happened in the Yuhui nunnery. The moment the officials of the Ministry of Justice left, another big accident happened in the Yuhui nunnery, which was even more serious than the last time. Not only several Buddhist halls were burned, but also several residences of the former emperor's S were burned down. Many people died, including nuns and pilgrims, as well as some black-clad men who appeared inexplicably. Most of the people who died were these black-clad men. They appeared in various places, but most of them were the residences of the former emperor's S on the high wall. Not only the whole capital city, but also the whole court was shocked. Everyone was guessing that the purpose of these black-clad men was related to the former emperor's S. But they were just some useless S. Who couldn't tolerate them? Could it be the emperor who sat high above? This made many people who were secretly guessing not dare to think further. They only felt that there must be something fishy about it. Chapter 518. Xiao Wanru was also summoned and asked carefully several times. Xiao Wanru only said that she had escaped the disaster by hiding at that time. When Xiao Jia left, she was still there. Xiao Jia told the truth, but she only said that there was something wrong in the hall and the Buddha lamps were extinguished. Then she ran away first, followed by Xiao Wanru and her two maids. Xiao Jia was also very lucky. She ran in front and ran fast. When the main hall was on fire, she had already met a nun of the Yuhui nunnery. Later, she directly hid in the nun's yard. Although she was frightened and fell several times, she was still very lucky. Rui, and great elder princess, also came up the mountain to accompany Xiao Wanru, for fear that her granddaughter would be frightened. However, old madam hurried down the mountain with the excuse that she was frightened and was sick. Xiao Jia and others followed her down the mountain together. Only Xiao Yanru stayed, saying that she would continue to help Xiao Wanru preside over the religious rite. The religious rite in the next 2 days was also finished in a hurry. Pushun Nun was also frightened that day. It was said that a man in black broke into her meditation room and was stabbed in the arm. She was unable to continue the religious rite and asked her 2 disciples to support her. The entire Yuhui nunnery was under martial law. Except for old Madame of Duke Xing's mansion and her entourage, no one was allowed to go down the mountain. Moreover, no one was allowed to handle any affairs. The previous work was also finished hastily. The Buddha hall was suddenly on fire. It was thought that the hall was burned by the lightning and thunder in the heavens mansion. As for the reason that the Buddha lamps suddenly went out one by one, Xiao Jia said, of course, there was a reason. Naturally, it was raining and the wind was strong, which blew out the dim Buddha lamps. Of course, Xiao Wanru did not admit this view, but she acquiesced. Many people from the Ministry of Justice came and lived in a simple bamboo shed temporarily set up outside the Yuhui nunnery. There were nuns in the Yuhui nunnery, and there were some nuns with different identities. In addition, most of the pilgrims were also women, so it was not convenient for the people from the Ministry of Justice to live in the Yuhui nunnery directly. Some things that had been asked were asked again and again, except that it was inconvenient to ask too many questions because of their high status. Yu Jie, Chu Lu, and Qing were also asked 3 or 4 times. The rest of the time, they followed Xiao Wanru to cultivate in the silence room. The entire Yuhui nunnery was tightly blocked. There was a rumor in the capital city that there was a descendant of the former emperor in the Yuhui nunnery and it was related to the former emperor's S. It was said that the former emperor had more than Prince Chen. At that time, there was another who was also pregnant and seemed to be a few months younger than Prince Chen. It was only because Prince Chen's biological mother was the late empress that the child was saved. The other one was not so lucky. Later, she gave birth to a son and secretly sent him out of the palace. His mother was sent to the Yuhui nunnery to cultivate in seclusion as the son of the former emperor, who was sent out of the imperial palace, secretly gathered some people who were loyal to the former emperor and prepared to go to the Yuhui nunnery to save his mother, which led to the tragedy of the Yuhui nunnery. However, there was another theory. It was said that the remnants of the previous dynasty had revived. The rebellion a few years ago was done by the remnants of the previous dynasty. At that time, they almost succeeded, but this time, it was the previous dynasty that had revived. Because of the previous chaos judgment incident, there were a lot of people who didn't believe this. It was chaotic outside, but the courtyard where Xiao Yanru and Xiao Wanru lived was relatively quiet. Except for someone coming to ask about them from time to time, the 2 of them had been cultivating quietly in the courtyard with their servant girls. "Miss, the first miss is here." Chu Lu came in to report. Although Xiao Wanru and Xiao Yanru lived in the same courtyard, they basically stayed in their own rooms and hardly went out. Rui and Great Elder Princess came to visit Xiao Wanru, but no one came to visit Xiao Yanru. Xiao Yanru just stayed in her room all day. It was said that she was also frightened and was not in good health. "Invite her in." Chu Lu rolled her watery eyes with a smile. Her maternal grandma was still here just now. It was a coincidence that she came after leaving. Xiao Yanru came in with a slightly pale face and did not look very well. Xiao Wanru stood up to greet her. Then the 2 of them sat down casually on the mat with their legs crossed, and Yu Jie served tea. "Big sister, how are you?" Xiao Wanru looked at Xiao Yanru, who was not in good spirits and asked. "Thank you for your concern, 5th sister." "I'm okay," Xiao Yanru said in a hoarse voice and reached out to rub her forehead. She did not look good in any way. "Big sister, you'd better go down the mountain first. Father and mother's religious rites are over now. It's useless for you to stay here. You'd better go down the mountain to see a doctor," Xiao Wanru said softly. "The Ministry of Justice has opened the door for Grandma to go down the mountain before. If I go down the mountain now, I'll have to say it again. I'm really embarrassed." Xiao Yanru shook her head, raised her beautiful face, and forced a gentle smile. I'm fine. I'll accompany you to chant scriptures here. Her eyes fell on the scriptures in front of the mat. There was a wooden fish beside the scriptures. At first glance, she knew that Xiao Wanru had been knocking on the wooden fish and chanting scriptures here before. Xiao Yanru could hear it from time to time in her room. She reached out and asked, "Sister, what scriptures are you chanting?" "It's nothing special. It's just a scripture for expiating souls. I got it from Huiming Nun," Xiao Wanru said with a soft smile. Xiao Yanru picked it up and flipped through it a few times. Feeling bored, she put it down again and said, "The weather is good today. Fifth sister, can you accompany me for a walk?" After the lightning and thunder that day, the heat seemed to have subsided. In the past few days, it was not so hot even during the day. In particular, there was mountain wind on the mountain. It was indeed a good time to stroll. "Big sister, the Ministry of Justice doesn't allow us to walk freely." Xiao Wanru shook her head and refused. Now only Rui, a great elder princess, could walk freely in the nunnery, and it was because of her identity. Thinking of this, she suddenly had an idea and a trace of deepness appeared in her watery eyes. "Don't go far. Just walk over there. It's not bad because of the scenery there," Xiao Yanru suggested and reached out to rub her forehead again. It was obvious that she was very uncomfortable. "Okay, then I'll accompany you." Xiao Wanru thought for a while and agreed, although she was in a dilemma. The two of them walked out of the courtyard together with a servant girl. There was no one near the gate of the courtyard, but they saw people in the clothes of the Ministry of Justice not far away. Seeing the two misses of Duke Xing's mansion coming out, the people of the Ministry of Justice immediately disappeared. They should have gone to report it. Walking along the road casually, they came to the place where Chu Liuxin had seen the misses in the blind date. The scenery here was really good. There were mountains, rivers, and a few clumps of weeds growing randomly in the cracks of the stones. It was more natural and leisurely than those planted in other mansions. "Big sister, let's stay here. If we go on walking, the people of the Ministry of Justice will definitely come to stop us." Xiao Wanru stood still and looked up. There was a cliff at the top, and the trees on the mountain were verdant. It was an excellent place to enjoy the scenery. "It's okay. We won't go far. We'll just walk around nearby. Great Elder Princess is still here, so the Ministry of Justice will definitely not make things difficult for you." Xiao Yanru also looked at the hill above her head, narrowed her eyes, and said casually, "Then let's stay here, lest we have to borrow Grandma's power for me." Xiao Wanru shook her head and walked to an octagonal pavilion on the side. Yujie walked quickly into the pavilion first, wiped the fence on one side, and then stepped aside. Xiao Wanru came in and sat down leaning against the fence. Seeing Xiao Yanru's expression, Shuqi hurriedly came over and wiped the fence on the other side. Xiao Yanru also sat down. "We won't go far. We just want to relax for a while. If you don't want to borrow Great Elder Princess's power, I'll do it," Xiao Yanru said with a smile in an amiable manner. Xiao Wanru sneered in her heart. There was no difference between Xiao Yanru and herself. Since they were cousins, they could rely on Grandma on the mountain now. Even if they didn't say anything, others would think that they had borrowed Grandma's power. Now in the Yuhui nunnery, even the abbess was under surveillance and almost didn't walk outside. However, she and Xiao Yanru could come and go at will with Grandma's power. What would people think of Grandma? Although Grandma had a noble status, she actually didn't have any power. "No, let's just sit here for a while. I've been tired recently." Xiao Wanru shook her head and refused softly. She also reached out to rub her forehead. Yujie came over cleverly, stood beside her, and reached out to massage her forehead. Xiao Wanru stopped and closed her eyes. She quietly let Yujie massage the acupoints on her forehead. For a moment, it was quiet in the pavilion. Seeing that they began to massage quietly, Xiao Yenru showed a little annoyance in her eyes, but she soon hid it. Fifth sister, let me help you. As she spoke, she stood up and was about to walk to Yujie's position to massage Xiao Wanru's forehead for Yujie. Xiao Wanru suddenly opened her eyes and waved her hand. I don't dare to trouble you, big sister. Big sister, I'm really tired and have to go back to have a rest. If you feel well, you can enjoy the scenery here. She meant that she wanted to leave Xiao Yenru alone. Fifth sister, sit with me for a while. It's not convenient for me to sit here alone. Xiao Yenru sat down and pleaded softly. There were originally only nuns in the Yuhui nunnery, so it was okay for them to sit here. But now there were men of the Ministry of Justice everywhere. It was indeed better to sit with a few more people than to enjoy the scenery alone. Big sister, I'm really sorry. I'm really not feeling well, so I can't accompany you. Xiao Wanru stood up and bowed sideways to Xiao Yenru. Then she turned around and went back the way they came without looking at Xiao Yenru's expression. Behind her, Xiao Yenru's face turned pale with anger. If it weren't for her good self-restraint, she would have almost come over and pulled Xiao Wanru. Miss. Shuchi whispered behind her, asking her what to do next. Xiao Yenru suppressed the annoyance in her heart, clenched her fists hard, put them down slightly, stood up, and followed Xiao Wanru back. Without Xiao Wanru, it was useless for her to be here. Chapter 5:19. Although Xiao Wanru left first, she walked slowly. Xiao Yenru, who walked behind her, caught up with her in a few steps and said that she also felt a little uncomfortable. So the two of them walked slowly and chatted. Before they went far, they suddenly heard a voice behind them, Mrs., please wait. Xiao Wanru and Xiao Yenru looked at each other and turned their heads in confusion. They had seen the officer of the Ministry of Justice who had been guarding outside when they went out just now, and now he was standing behind a good-looking young man in his 20s. Are you Mrs. of Duke Xing's mansion? The young man took 2 steps forward, cupped his hands, and said. Xiao Wanru took a step back. Xiao Yenru was the elder, so at this time, it was natural for her to deal with them. We are from Duke Xing's mansion. May I know what you mean? Xiao Yenru looked up and down at the good-looking young man and asked. That's good, that's good. I have a letter entrusted by someone and want to give it to you, 5th Miss Xiao. The young man took out a letter from his sleeve and handed it to her with a smile. Xiao Wanru raised her watery eyes in surprise and looked at the person in front of her. She was sure that she didn't know him. Since you have a letter, why don't you send it directly? Instead of waiting for our miss here. Yujie took 2 steps forward, stood in front of Xiao Wanru, and asked. She was taller than Xiao Wanru, so she blocked Xiao Wanru behind her. Originally, I was going to come to the yard to lodge, but my friend who asked me to deliver the letter said that I must deliver the letter to 5th Miss Xiao, or at least see 5th Miss Xiao receive the letter with my own eyes. In order to live up to my friend's trust, I took the risk to stop 5th Miss Xiao when you two were out. The young man said with a smile and glanced behind Yujie. It seemed that this should be the 5th Miss Xiao. As for the beautiful one in front of him, she was certainly the first miss of Duke Xing's mansion, the first beauty in the capital city. She was really beautiful and stunning. He was also a son of a noble family in the capital city, so he naturally knew how to be polite. When he cupped his hands to salute just now, he didn't look around at all. Now when he wanted to look at the 5th Miss Xiao again, Yujie had already stood in front of him. However, he didn't care whether he could see the 5th Miss Xiao or not. The first Miss Xiao was really beautiful. None of the women he had seen could compare with the first Miss Xiao. Hearing that the first Miss Xiao had not been engaged, he couldn't help but be a little more tempted. Friend? What friend? Yujie didn't take the letter and asked. Xiao Wanru poked her head out from behind her and glanced at the young man opposite her. She found that his attention was all on Xiao Yenru. Although he was talking to her, he secretly glanced at Xiao Yenru from time to time with a slightly red face. Miss Wu will understand after seeing it. Although he was displeased that a maid dared to reprimand him like this, it was inconvenient to reprimand her in front of a beautiful woman. He only looked slightly displeased. It's said that it's a very important matter related to the safety of the 5th Mississippi. You'll know after you read it carefully. After saying that, he reached out his hand impatiently and motioned for Yu Jia to take the letter. Compared with the 5th Miss Xiao, who seemed to have an affair with someone else, he was more willing to talk with the 1st Miss Xiao now. He had only heard about her before, but now he saw her in person. The beauty of the 1st Miss Xiao was beyond his imagination. She was indeed as beautiful as jade and charming as she was. I'm afraid you've made a mistake. I don't know any of your friends, and I won't accept any letter. Please give the letter back to where it came from. Xiao Wanru said lightly. 5th Miss, how can it be possible that you don't know each other? You grew up together and can be considered. The young man was full of Xiao Yanru now, so he was not in the mood to deal with Xiao Wanru, so he said impatiently at once. How dare you? Who asked you to ruin my reputation? Xiao Wanru shouted sternly. As soon as she said that, the young man immediately realized that he had made a slip of the tongue. When he was about to apologize, he heard Xiao Wanru say coldly, if you send a letter, go to my grandma. If my grandma thinks that someone is not trying to frame me, she will give the letter to me. After saying that, she turned around and left. Yu Jia put her hands on her hips, looked at the young man, and said, Hey, who is trying to frame my master? If Great Elder Princess finds out, she will definitely teach you a lesson. After saying that, she turned around and left with Xiao Wanru. Hey, no, I was really entrusted by someone. The young man was anxious and said loudly in an attempt to stop Xiao Wanru. Unexpectedly, Yu Jia turned around and glared at him fiercely. Is this letter for 5th sister? Xiao Yanru's eyes flickered and she asked curiously. Big sister, if you accept this letter, I will think that you also want to frame me. Xiao Wanru's cold voice suddenly came from the front with a hint of coldness. After saying that, she turned around the path and disappeared with Yu Jie. Miss, why did the 5th Miss do this again? Shuqi felt indignant for Xiao Yanru. Halfway through her words, she found that there were others around, so she hurriedly blurted out her words. Again? The young man's heart skipped a beat and he looked at Xiao Yanru with a little pity in his eyes. He didn't expect that the 1st Miss Xiao would be bullied by her younger sister, which really made him feel sorry for her. Thinking of the 5th Miss Xiao's words just now, he felt very angry. He heard that the 5th Miss Xiao had not been raised in the capital city since she was a child, but had been living outside. As expected, the 5th Miss Xiao did not know etiquette and did not appreciate people's kindness. She said that she was trying to frame her younger sister. Don't talk nonsense. Xiao Yanru reprimanded her softly. Shuqi looked aggrieved, but she did not dare to say anything more. She looked very well behaved, which made the young man increasingly like her. Is this letter really for 5th sister? Xiao Yanru turned to the young man and asked hesitantly. The young man pinched the envelope with his hand. At this moment, he did not know whether to send it or not, so he felt very embarrassed. It's for the 5th Mississippi. An old friend of the 5th Miss asked me to send it to her. He was afraid that the letter would be lost, so he specially asked me to hand it to the 5th Miss in person. I didn't expect that the 5th Miss would misunderstand. 1st Miss, what do you think? I don't dare to accept this letter. If I accept it, my 5th sister will blame me. Xiao Yanru shook her head and said helplessly. She could have accepted it, but Xiao Wanru's last few words made her unable to intervene in this matter. Unexpectedly, Xiao Wanru was so vigilant. But this letter? The young man was also in a dilemma. At that time, he had patted his chest and agreed. It was very convenient for the officials of the Ministry of Justice to meet the 5th Miss of Duke Xing's mansion, who was inconvenient to go out in the Yuhui nunnery. Unexpectedly, the 5th Miss avoided him like a snake or a scorpion. Could it be that she really had an affair with Qi Tianyu as he thought? I can't do anything about this letter. Your Excellency, do as you see fit. Xiao Yanru bowed sideways and said softly. She had an outstanding appearance and behaved delicately and elegantly, which made the young man fascinated. He only felt that the first Miss Xiao in front of him was indeed beautiful, but her heart was even more beautiful. Seeing that she was about to leave, he subconsciously took 2 steps forward and said, "First Miss Xiao, Your Excellency, what else can I do for you?" Xiao Yanru stopped, turned around and asked with a smile. The young man's face turned red at once and he couldn't even say a word. He didn't know why he called her. Hearing this question, he looked embarrassed. May I ask who sent this letter? Xiao Yanru looked at his embarrassed face and smiled softly, as if she had just asked a question casually to help him out of the predicament. It's Qi Tianyu, the former 3rd prince. The young man felt that the first Miss Xiao in front of him was more intelligent and replied hurriedly. 3rd prince? Xiao Yanru seemed to be a little interested. Yes, 3rd prince. I heard that he grew up with the 5th Miss Xiao. He knew that the 5th Miss Xiao was trapped in the Yuhui nunnery, so he asked me to send a letter to you. The young man waved the letter in his hand and said helplessly. In fact, he really did it out of kindness. Because he had been reprimanded just now, he didn't dare to say that they were childhood sweethearts, but only implicitly said that they grew up together. 5th sister did grow up in Jiangzhou. Sorry to trouble you, Your Excellency. Xiao Yanru, who was dignified and decent, bowed deeply to the young man again, and then turned to leave slowly. This time, the young man didn't dare to stop her. He just looked at Xiao Yanru's receding figure with a little affection. The first Miss Xiao was really perfect. Whoever could marry her would have a perfect life. Not long after Xiao Wanru returned to the silence room, Xiao Yanru also came back and followed her into the silence room. She asked Shuqi to go back to her room to clean up, saying that it was a little untidy since she hadn't lived here for a long time. Shuqi would clean her room when she was free. 5th sister, I asked just now. It was said that the letter was sent by Qi Tianyu, Qi Tianhua. Is he Sister Rongji's elder brother? Xiao Yanru took the tea served by Yujie, took a sip, and asked curiously. Xiao Wanru looked up at her and saw her with an exaggerated smile. She raised the corner of her mouth and said sarcastically, when we were in Jiangzhou, he and the first Miss Qin were engaged. Later, the first Miss Qin was going to marry into Duke Yang's mansion, so she and her mother, Madame D, set me up. After leaving Jiangzhou, the first young master of the Qi family put all the blame on me and said that he would fight with me to the death. Big sister, do you think it's normal for the person who used to fight with me to the death to send me a letter that seems to care about me? Fight with me to the death? Xiao Yanru was stunned. She really didn't expect this answer, because Qi Tianyu didn't mention it. Yes, fight with me to the death. Xiao Wanru looked at Xiao Yanru with a slight smile and said lazily, as if she were talking about someone else's business. Xiao Yanru's face changed slightly, and she said indignantly, who does he think he is? How dare he say that? Maybe he thinks that my identity has changed, or I'm useful to him again. Of course, it's also possible that someone wants to use him to ruin my reputation. Big sister, you know many people in the capital city. Who do you think is most likely to set me up? Since I recognize my family, I have been living on the mountain and seldom go out. I don't even know many people. Xiao Wanru asked with a faint smile. Well, it's really hard to say. Since the man surnamed Qi is not a good person, we might as well take someone to get this letter back and destroy it, lest it will affect your reputation, Xiao Yanru said angrily on behalf of Xiao Wanru. Go directly to get it back. Xiao Wanru raised her eyebrows. No, it will attract too much attention. Xiao Yanru shook her head. Chapter 520. It's too obvious to ask for it directly. Fifth sister, how about? Xiao Yanru looked a little hesitant, as if she really didn't know what to do at the moment. Xiao Wanru looked at her stealthily with her clear eyes. waiting for her meaning. Why don't you ask him to meet you secretly and make it clear? In this way, he won't send such an ambiguous letter and make others misunderstand. I think the official of the Ministry of Justice seems to be very suspicious of the relationship between you and the first young master of Qi's mansion. Xiao Yanru said with a serious face, of course, you can't go alone. I have to accompany you. In this way, even if someone sees it, they won't say that you have a secret relationship. Her words were extremely righteous. She had even thought about how to explain for Xiao Wanru if they were discovered. It could be said that she had thought about everything. If Xiao Wanru was really a girl who knew nothing, she would probably be cheated this time. If she went to meet Qi Tianyu with Xiao Yanru, Qi Tianyu and Xiao Yanru would refute at the same time and say that she used Xiao Yanru as a shield to deliberately lure her out and then left her aside to meet with a man because she was afraid of being discovered having a secret meeting with Qi Tianyu. In this way, her reputation would be ruined. Saying the same thing verbally and saying it the other way around were two completely different things. Big sister, I have nothing to say to him. Let's fight to the death. Anyway, I don't care. Xiao Wanru thought for a while and refused with a smile. She slightly curled the corner of her mouth and said, even if I won the third place, so what? I have my grandma and I'm not afraid of him. Moreover, girls in the inner courtyard and boys in the outer courtyard rarely meet each other. The disdain in his words was obvious. This is not good. After all, we grew up together. He may have been deceived by what happened at that time. Now the whole capital city knows what happened to the first Miss Qin in Jiangzhou. If the first young master of the Qi family is still rational, he will definitely not blame you. I think he specially sent this letter to show his concern for you. It can be regarded as a humble apology for what happened at that time. Xiao Yanru wiped the corner of her mouth with a handkerchief and said with concern, but no matter what he means, he is an outsider and has nothing to do with fifth sister now. We have to avoid arousing suspicion. Don't send this kind of letter or other things in the future. This is not Jiangzhou. If there is some gossip, it is always bad for girls. Can you say clearly or early? You have to make it clear. Shall we ask him to go up the mountain to make it clear? Xiao Wanru was silent for a long time this time, as if she couldn't make a decision at the moment. Of course, let him go up the mountain and make it clear. What happened in Jiangzhou is over, and the truth has been revealed to the world. Speaking of which, young Master Qi and you are both victims. After making it clear, go your separate ways and don't contact each other again. Xiao Yanru's eyes became increasingly sincere and her expression became gentle. Men may not know how important a girl's reputation is, but how can fifth sister and I know it? Fifth sister's current identity makes it more inappropriate for her to write to other men. Originally, I did want to receive the letter for you, but later I thought it was wrong. If I received the letter, it might really cause a misunderstanding. Xiao Yanru kept saying that she was considerate of Xiao Wanru and wholeheartedly wanted to be a good elder sister who was afraid that her younger sister would go the wrong way. Any younger sister would be moved by her words. Xiao Wanru's words in front of the door were also harsh. Xiao Yanru, as her elder sister, not only didn't care about it, but also helped her to make plans. Xiao Yanru was indeed worthy of the rumor that she was the miss with the best reputation in the capital city. Then I'll do as you say, big sister. Xiao Wanru didn't hesitate too much this time. Since Xiao Yanru had said such sincere words, it would be a little distant for her to refuse. Fifth sister, do you want to make an appointment yourself, or should I send someone to talk to the official of the Ministry of Justice? Xiao Yanru asked. Big sister, I'll have to trouble you. Xiao Wanru thought for a while and said. It's no trouble at all. We are sisters. Then I'll go back and ask Shuqi to go out and make it clear to that official and ask him to bring the first young master of the Qi family up the mountain tonight, okay? Xiao Yanru said with a smile, as if she didn't know that others might suspect her if she made an appointment. She had never doubted her younger sister's image of a good elder sister and even didn't care that her reputation might be damaged. If Xiao Wanru hadn't died in Xiao Yenru's slander in the last life, she might really have been deceived by her hypocritical appearance. Thank you, big sister. Xiao Wanru showed a kind of trust at this time. Of course, Xiao Wanru didn't give this kind of trust to Xiao Yenru unconditionally. Xiao Yenru fought for it and felt that it was more and more credible. Xiao Yenru was just a little girl raised on the mountain. Her mind was similar to that of an 11-year-old girl when she went up the mountain. Xiao Yenru had 1,000 reasons to believe that without Rui and great elder princess's guidance, Xiao Wanru would be nothing. It was inconvenient for Xiao Wanru to tell Rui and great elder princess about this kind of thing, which happened to be convenient for her to do things. Xiao Yenru went back to arrange her servant girl to go out and make an appointment. Xiao Wanru stood up, walked to the desk in front of the window, lifted the white veil on the curtain, and saw an unfinished painting. She picked up the brush on the inkstone, looked out of the window, and made a few strokes. Miss, why did the first miss agree to make an appointment? If someone finds out, how will she explain it? Yujie came in with a new cup of tea, put it on the corner of the desk, stepped aside, and couldn't help asking. Who saw her servant girl make an appointment? Xiao Wanru said casually and made another stroke. There are so many people in the Yuhui nunnery now, so they must have seen her servant girl making an appointment. Yujie answered. There were not many nuns in the Yuhui nunnery, so they might not have seen this kind of thing. But now, in addition to the nuns in the Yuhui nunnery, there were also people from the Ministry of Justice. The people from the Ministry of Justice were still digging 3 feet into the ground to find the murderer, so how could they not keep an eye on every suspicious or not suspicious person? So what if they saw it? They can also say that they sent it to me. If they have Qi Tianyu's testimony, it will be even more convincing. Xiao Wanru put down the brush, stood a few steps away, and looked at the painting she had painted. As long as Qi Tianyu said that Xiao Wanru had deliberately asked Xiao Yenru's servant girl to make an appointment for her and then gave the servant girl a large banknote, he could put the blame on her. How did the first young master of the Qi family and the first Miss Xiao know each other? Yujie was shocked. Why not? Qi Rongji is Xiao Yenru's younger sister now. How could they not know each other? Xiao Wanru walked back to the desk and added a few strokes to the empty places she had seen just now, making the whole painting more substantial. One person's testimony might not be enough, but what about 2 people? Moreover, many people must have seen her meeting with Qi Tianyu, so the facts spoke louder than words. Miss, why don't you let me do it? I can also ask the official from the Ministry of Justice to prove that you made an appointment with the first young master of the Qi family just to make it clear that you don't send letters here in the future. Yujie was a little anxious. She didn't want Xiao Wanru to have anything to do with Qi Tianyu. It's useless. Xiao Wanru said with a sweet smile. Seeing Xiao Yenru's infatuated look, the young official from the Ministry of Justice just now knew that she was unreliable. This won't work, and that won't work. What should we do? No, miss, you can't go to see the first young master of the Qi family. Yujie was so anxious that her forehead began to sweat. This kind of thing would ruin any miss's reputation, not to mention that Xiao Wanru was still on the mountain now. She said that she was observing mourning for her parents for 3 years. If she failed at the last step, not only would she lose her reputation, but she would also be scolded. What was more, the situation on the mountain was like this now. No one knew whether other things would be involved. Xiao Wanru tilted her head, looked at Yujie's nervous face, put down the writing brush and smiled. Miss, you can still smile. This matter can't be looked down upon. Yujie said anxiously. Don't worry. I'll be fine. I'll ask my grandma to go there tonight. Xiao Wanru said meaningfully with a trace of gloominess in her watery eyes. The Qi's mansion had always been secretive about what happened in Jiangzhou. It seemed that they were helping someone hide something. Although Qi Nuru's matter had basically been recognized by everyone, no one in the Qi's mansion had made a clear statement. Even Qi Tianyu, the victim, always took care of the Qin's mansion's face, which made people feel good about him. Xiao Wanru had long wanted to tear him apart because of his clingy look. In the last life, she was a victim. This time, she wanted to make use of this matter to officially fall out with Qi Tianyu. No matter what Qin Huayong was planning, she didn't want him to collude with the Qi's mansion again. She couldn't allow her grandma and Shui Rulan to be implicated by him. If he only did it for Qin Yuru, now that Qin Yuru's reputation had been ruined, what else couldn't Qi Tianyu say? Or even if he didn't say it, he could spread the word through other channels. She would not forget how Qi Tianyu hurried up the mountain to express his love after he won the 3rd place. When she was in the Qin's mansion, Qin Huayong intended to unite with the Qi's mansion by marriage. No matter how outstanding Qi Tianyu was, how could the two mansions sit down and get close to each other after such a thing happened? Moreover, there were other outstanding children in the capital city, right? Thinking of the last life, even after what happened in Jiangzhou, Qi Tianyu and Qin Yuru still had no grudge. As for Magistrate Qi and Qin Huayong, they were still a pair of good brothers. They often wrote to each other and sent gifts from Jiangzhou from time to time. The Qin's mansion also prepared gifts for them. No matter what Qin Huayong was planning, Xiao Wanru was sure that he was definitely not Chu Liuchen's man. She put the painting on the desk aside, pulled out a piece of paper, picked up the writing brush, thought for a while, and wrote it down. When she finished writing, she hung the paper to dry a little, but didn't put it away. Yujia, where is the letter that Madame of Duke Xing gave me? Miss, wait a minute. I'll find it right away. Seeing her Miss's calm behavior, Yujia was a little moved. Hearing her Miss's question, she immediately took out a letter from a drawer of the desk and handed it over. She pulled out the letter, looked through it, saw the flower paper inside, and put it on the table. Go and pick a few orchid leaves according to the pattern on it. Xiao Wanru instructed and reached out to point at the orchid leaves on it. Everyone had their own preferences. The flower paper, bought outside, was actually not in line with these unmarried Mrs. preferences. They would always make their own style cleverly. These leaves were cleverly bent into the shape of the word "are you?" Together with a few pieces of elegant grass painted on it, they formed the word "are you?" Chapter 521. Your Highness, where are you going? Seeing Chu Luchen going out, Xiao Xuanzi hurriedly put down the tray in his hand and asked. Chu Luchen, who was wearing a black mink cashmere cloak, was not only black on the outside, but also a black robe on the inside. Chu Luchen turned around and walked out. Your Highness, you can't go out today. Xiao Xuanzi hurriedly chased after him and said, Your Highness, don't forget that the Empress Dowager will send someone to see you later and ask the imperial physician to come and check your pulse. Just tell them that I'm asleep. Chu Luchen said casually. Xiao Xuanzi's face turned bitter. If someone else said this, it might be reasonable, but it was the prince who said it, it was really wrong. After all, his master had been lying in bed all the time. He slept during the day and at night. In fact, there was no distinction between day and night. Even if he slept at night, he might not be able to fall asleep, so how could he say that he was asleep? Master, the Empress Dowager said that the imperial physician's medical skills are very good. Have you forgotten? She also said that the emperor also recognized the imperial physician's medical skills and specially asked him to come to see you. Xiao Xuanzi tried hard to persuade him again. This matter could not be delayed. If it was only in the Empress Dowager's place, his master could be a little willful, but there was still the emperor. According to the Empress Dowager that day, the emperor also paid attention to this matter. If his master went out, what should he do? It doesn't matter. Just tell them that I'm asleep and no one is allowed to disturb me. Ask him to come tomorrow. Chu Luchen waved his wide sleeves and continued to walk out. But. Xiao Xuanzi stammered and couldn't say a word. But what? Is it possible that I'm not allowed to sleep? Chu Luchen squinted his eyes, glanced at Xiao Xuanzi maliciously and strode away. Your Highness, Your Highness. Xiao Xuanzi called him a few more times and helplessly watched His Highness leave. Then he stamped his feet heavily and turned back to find Dr. Qi in a hurry to think of a solution. If he couldn't satisfy the imperial physician sent by the Empress Dowager, he had to find a more reasonable explanation. As the night fell, the lights were lit. Xiao Yanru, who had had dinner with Xiao Wanru just now, looked at the night outside, gently wiped the water on the corner of her mouth with a handkerchief, and said with a smile, "Fifth sister, it's almost time. Let's go." "Big sister. I think we shouldn't go." Xiao Wanru hesitated with a little uneasiness in her watery eyes. She picked up the handkerchief in her hand and put it down again. Obviously, she was really uneasy. There was a trace of sarcasm in Xiao Yanru's slightly lowered eyes, but when she raised her head again, she was calm and decent. She looked at Xiao Wanru like a willful child and said, "Fifth sister, he has already come here. Now we have to go to the mountain with the help of the official of the Ministry of Justice. If you say you don't go now, if the first young master of the Qi family is angry and insists on rushing in, it will be more likely to cause trouble." Knowing that Xiao Wanru might regret it, she immediately did it when Xiao Wanru asked her to deliver the message. She was afraid that Xiao Wanru would regret it. In the current situation, Xiao Wanru couldn't regret it even if she wanted to. Hearing the faint threat in Xiao Yanru's words, Xiao Wanru looked very embarrassed. She wrapped the handkerchief in her hand around her fingertips several times, and then put it down and lowered her head. She didn't say whether she would go or not. It was obvious that she had been undecided. "Well, fifth sister, go and have a look. If you find something wrong, it won't be too late to come back." Xiao Yanru stood up, reached out to pull her arm, and pulled her up. "Let's have a look first. Let's not move." Xiao Wanru stood up, still frowning. "Okay, let's have a look first. If we find anything unusual, we can come back. If others don't find us, they won't know that we have been out." Xiao Yanru reassured Xiao Wanru again. Well, let's go and have a look." Xiao Wanru nodded helplessly. Since things had come to this point, it seemed unreasonable not to go. The two of them quietly went to the front yard of the Yuhui nunnery with a servant girl. The officials of the Ministry of Justice were now guarding in front of the Yuhui nunnery. There were many simple sheds in that area. Some large Buddhist halls were in the front part, and only the incense rooms and meditation rooms were in the back part of the Yuhui nunnery. Xiao Wanru lived closer to the back mountain, so they had to pass by many places on the way. The appointed place was a relatively small Buddhist hall. Originally, the Yuhui nunnery was closed at night. However, because the officials of the Ministry of Justice were guarding outside, the Yuhui nunnery was not closed at night. Several chief officials would find a Buddhist hall to handle affairs at night. After all, the lights in the Buddhist hall were much better than the simple ones outside. Moreover, some Buddhist halls were lit all night long. Both of them put on a hooded cloak and wrapped themselves in it. In the dark, Xiao Yanru led the way in front, and Xiao Wanru followed behind. They quietly avoided several officials of the Ministry of Justice they met on the way and walked to the outside of the Yuhui nunnery. The Buddhist hall they chose was not big, just at the corner near the front. Because it was too small, the Buddhist lamps were not lit. They could only vaguely see the outline of the hall with the help of the lights on the road. "Fifth sister, go in now. I'll wait outside. If there is anything unusual, call me and I'll come in right away." Xiao Yanru turned to Xiao Wanru and said in a low voice. She pointed at the half-closed Buddhist hall and said, "The first young master of the Qi family should have arrived. If there is no one in the Buddhist hall at night, it will be closed. Big sister, I'd better not go." Xiao Wanru hesitated again. "At this time, why are you still hesitating? Go ahead and make it clear to him. You will be the miss of Duke Xing's mansion in the future. Even if he is the Tanhua, he can't get close to you. However, you should go in for a short time. Just say it in a few words. Don't waste too much time with him. Xiao Yanru said with concern and reminded her a few more words. She looked as sincere as she could be, as if she was thinking about Xiao Wanru sincerely. Well, all right. Xiao Wanru seemed to be forced to go in. She moved her feet slightly and walked forward, and Qing hurriedly followed her. Why did she bring a little maid with her? Xiao Yanru asked Shuqi in a low voice when she saw that Xiao Wanru did not bring the two principal maids, Yujie and Chu Lu. I don't know. Just now, I only paid attention to the fifth miss and didn't notice who was behind her. Shuqi also shook her head. The first miss only asked her to pay attention to not letting the fifth miss go back halfway, but she really didn't notice that it was Qing, the maid behind Xiao Wanru. Maybe the fifth miss doesn't want others to know about it, even if it's her principal maid who is close to her. After all, Qing is a little maid who knows nothing. The fifth miss may feel more at ease with her. Xiao Yanru raised the corner of her mouth with a sneer. She was really stupid. She didn't ask a loyal personal maid to follow her, but asked a rude maid who knew nothing to follow her. However, the more stupid Xiao Wanru was, the more advantageous it would be for her. She had thought that after the incident, Xiao Wanru's maid would definitely defend Xiao Wanru. Now, it was much easier to deal with a little maid who had seen a lot of things than a principal maid who had seen a lot of things. Xiao Wanru was very happy about this. Have the people over there been recruited? First miss, rest assured. I have hinted to the official that the fifth miss might have a secret rendezvous with the first young master of the Qi family here. I believe he will come over in a while. Shuqi said with a smile. The first miss sent a letter at that time. After all, some words couldn't be delivered directly, so it was best to send a letter. Moreover, this letter was written in the tone of the 5th Mississippi. As for the official of the Ministry of Justice who delivered the message, she had hinted a lot and almost told the 5th Miss the time and place of the secret rendezvous. In addition, she hinted that the 5th Miss had been very arrogant in the past. She scolded the 1st Miss and didn't treat the 1st Miss as her biological sister at all. She had even asked the 1st Miss to send a letter to another man for a secret rendezvous before. This time, the official of the Ministry of Justice, whether for the sake of the first young master of the Qi family or the 1st Miss, would definitely take someone to ruin the 5th Miss plan and make the 5th Miss lose face. Xiao Yanru nodded with satisfaction and looked at the gate of the hall with burning eyes. At this moment, Xiao Wanru had entered the hall. It suddenly became quiet at the gate of the hall. Suddenly, a low voice of a woman came from the hall. Although it was not loud, Xiao Yanru heard it clearly. She couldn't help but be stunned. "First Miss, what's the sound?" Shuqi, who also heard it, trembled and asked anxiously. In the dark, Xiao Yanru shook her head silently and stared at the slightly closed gate of the hall with a frown. Logically speaking, there shouldn't be such a sound at this time. Could it be that there was an accident? The gate of the hall was suddenly pushed aside, and a black figure, who seemed to be a man, appeared in front of the gate. He waved in Xiao Yanru's direction and then turned to enter the hall. "First Miss, this. Shuqi lowered her voice and said in a panic. Things were beyond their imagination. Could it be that there was really an accident? Did the first young master of the Qi family come to the gate to invite the 1st Miss to discuss it? At this time, only the first young master of the Qi family knew that the 1st Miss was here. Let's go and have a look. After thinking for a while, Xiao Yanru made up her mind. At this critical moment, she couldn't fail at the last moment. The two of them arrived at the gate of the hall one after another. Looking at the dark hall, Xiao Yanru stopped cautiously and looked back at Shuqi. "Is young Master Qi in?" Shuqi asked in a low voice. "Come in." A voice came from inside. It was a little far away and low, sounding a little gloomy and anxious. Perhaps it was a little too low, so Xiao Yanru couldn't hear Qi Tianyu's voice clearly. However, she could be sure that it was not the voice of a woman. It should not be the voice of Xiao Wanru or Qing, the maid. "I'll go in and have a look. You stay at the gate of the hall." If someone comes, report to me quickly. Xiao Yanru warned cautiously. Someone would come later, so she had to ask Shuqi to keep an eye on it. Chapter 522. Shuqi waited outside anxiously and rubbed her hands from time to time with anxiety. Suddenly, she saw a light coming from afar, so she hurriedly reached out to knock on the door of the hall and said in a low voice, Miss, someone is coming. Come out quickly. There was no response from inside. Shuqi was so scared that her face changed dramatically. She knocked on her hands again and said anxiously, Miss. Hurry up. She looked up and found that someone had come over. It seemed that someone had seen her and reached out to point in her direction. Shuqi had no time to care about anything else and hurriedly flashed into the hall. It was so dark in the hall that she couldn't see her own fingers. After taking a few steps, Shuqi almost tripped and fell to the ground. She hurriedly reached out to hold the pillar beside her and sweated profusely in the dark. Miss, are you there? First young master of the Qi family. She didn't dare to raise her voice and could only call over and over again. However, it was quiet in the hall as if there was no sound at all. Suddenly, there came a low moan. Shuqi listened carefully and found that it was a man's voice instead of the first Mrs. Then there came another moan. It was a woman's voice. As soon as the familiar voice came, Shuqi was immediately overjoyed. She hurriedly groped in that direction and said anxiously, Miss, let's go quickly. Someone is coming. What's going on? In the dark, Qi Tianyu touched his dull head, sat up with the support of the altar table, and asked. First young master of the Qi family? Shuqi froze for a moment and rushed in the direction of the voice. It's me. Who hit me? Qi Tianyu stood up straight and still felt a headache. He touched his head with one hand and said. After closing his eyes hard, he felt that the hall in front of him was not so swaying anymore. Shuqi. In the dark, Xiao Yanru's voice also came, sounding a little weak. Shuqi rushed in that direction. Suddenly, she tripped over something and fell to the ground. Xiao Yanru screamed in pain. Miss, is it you? Let's go quickly. Someone is coming. Shuqi touched the ground and said anxiously. First Miss Xiao. Qi Tianyu also recognized Xiao Yanru's voice at this time. He composed himself and said with his face changing immediately. It's me. Why did I faint? Someone knocked me out just now. At this time, Xiao Yanru had realized that something was wrong. She stood up with the help of Shuqi's hand. Is there a side door here? Qi Tianyu arrived earlier than her, so he must have seen the surrounding environment. Yes, follow me. Qi Tianyu reacted quickly and said in a hurry, feeling flustered. He came here to meet Xiao Wanru in private, but he didn't see Xiao Wanru but Xiao Yanru. Moreover, both he and Xiao Yanru were knocked unconscious, so he immediately knew that something was wrong. It was not the time to talk about it in detail. He turned around and walked to the side door, while calling Xiao Yanru and her maid to come over. When the three of them met up and hurriedly walked towards the side door, the sound of footsteps came from outside the main hall. Under their horrified gazes, the door of the main hall was kicked open, and a strong light shone in from the outside. Xiao Yanru hurriedly reached out to block the strong light outside. A large group of people rushed in. Tianyu, I've been looking for you everywhere for fear that something might have happened to you. Are you meeting a beauty in private? The young official of the Ministry of Justice came in with a laugh, but he immediately seemed to be shocked by the scene in front of him. Looking at the scene in front of him in astonishment, his smile froze on his face. He looked at Qi Tianyu and then at Xiao Yanru, who reached out to cover her eyes, and said, Is this the fifth Miss Xiao? Shuqi hurriedly reached out to hold Xiao Yanru's head in her arms, lowered her head tightly, and didn't dare to move in a panic. Qiu Yu, I'm fine. You can go back. Qi Tianyu touched his head and said with displeasure, waved his hand, and said, I'm fine, Chiu Yu. You can go back. I really don't know. If I knew that you and the fifth Miss Xiao were here, I wouldn't have brought people here to look for you. Chiu Yu said with a smile, full of embarrassment for bumping into his good friend's plan. After saying that, he waved his hand and said to the people behind him, Go, go. It's not a big deal. You've found her. Keep your mouth shut when you go out in the future. Don't ruin the Miss's reputation. Yes. The people who came answered sparsely, and many of them smiled to watch a good show. Many people knew that the two Misses of Duke Xing's mansion were on the mountain. One was the first Miss Xiao, the first beauty in the capital city, and the other was naturally the fifth Miss Xiao in front of them. It was said that she was a filial daughter. Judging from her behavior of secretly meeting a man, it was not a good thing. With a good reputation, she was actually very lascivious. They had thought that the Lord's friend was missing. Many things had happened in the Yuhui nunnery recently, so they came to help look for him. They didn't expect to see such a scene. How could it be possible? They had never seen such a thing. The first Miss meeting a man in private under the moonlight was such an erotic thing, but they actually saw it. A large group of people left in a hurry. In the dark, Xiao Yanru secretly breathed a sigh of relief and her expression eased. Fortunately, she was wrapped tightly today. The light was too bright and blocked her eyes. Otherwise, she would have been unable to avoid that moment just now. Although she didn't see Xiao Wanru now, it still fell on Xiao Wanru. In the dark, Qi Tianyu also breathed a heavy sigh of relief and said in a low voice, First Miss, go quickly. There is a back door in the side hall next to here. You can leave directly. Shuqi, let's go. Xiao Yanru nodded. Since she had put the blame on Xiao Wanru, she couldn't stay and let others see her face. The people who walked out of the hall suddenly stopped and looked at the girl in front of them under the light in astonishment. Her face was half covered by a veil, and only a pair of beautiful eyes were exposed. They were a pair of beautiful eyes, which were slightly raised. Such eyes should look charming, but there was a bit of innocence on her face. At first glance, they could tell that she was a young Mississippi. Although they couldn't see the color of her face, they could tell that she was an extremely beautiful girl. A little servant girl stood beside her with a lantern. Her cloak and hood fell down. Although her face was covered by the light, she still looked amazing. Someone stepped back carefully and whispered to the person beside him, She can't be a fox, can she? Under the shadow of the light, her dress fluttered in the wind, which looked extremely extraordinary. How could it be possible? This is a nunnery. That person said in a trembling voice. He looked up at the plaque of the Buddha hall above his head, suggesting that even if there were demons and ghosts, there should be none in this place. This was the place where all the gods and Buddhas lived. How dare little demons come here? Excuse me, are you from the Ministry of Justice? Xiao Wanru asked softly. You are. Chiu Yu took 2 steps forward and cupped his hands to Xiao Wanru. He didn't recognize her. I'm the 5th Miss of Duke Xing's mansion. My big sister is missing, so I came all the way here just now. I wonder if you have seen my big sister. Xiao Wanru said calmly and curtsied to them in a dignified manner. The 5th Miss of Duke Xing's mansion. 5th Miss Xiao. She is inside, someone exclaimed, and someone turned around and pointed to the dark place in the hall behind them. They were so shocked that they couldn't even finish their words. If the person in front of them was the 5th Miss Xiao, then who was the one inside? Someone said that our first Miss came here with her maid Shuqi. Did you see her? Our Miss was afraid that something might happen to our first Miss, so she came here with me, but we didn't see her all the way. Qing shook the lantern a little, as if she wanted to see the person in front of her clearly, but she also let them see her face clearly. She was an 11 or 12-year-old maid, and she looked a little naive. I'll go and have a look. A staff of the Ministry of Justice suddenly turned around and ran into the hall. Several others looked at Xiao Wanru and then at the maid, and then turned around and followed him. Miss Qing said with a blank look. Is there any trace of my big sister? Xiao Wanru turned to Chiu Yu and asked. Chiu Yu was also at a loss. He pointed inside and then pointed at himself. At this moment, he didn't know whether it was the first Miss Xiao inside. His heart skipped a beat with inexplicable mixed feelings. For a moment, he didn't know how to answer. Qing, let's go and have a look. Seeing that he couldn't answer, Xiao Wanru also stepped into the hall. Qing answered and followed her. Where is she? Where did she go? Someone in the hall was asking and someone was running. Let's go to the side door to have a look. When Xiao Wanru walked in slowly, she only saw Qi Tianyu standing alone beside the altar table. Xiao Yanru and Shuqi had long disappeared. Many people went to look for them, and some people surrounded Qi Tianyu and looked around. Even the curtain under the altar table was lifted, but they still couldn't find them. Qi Tianyu lowered his head slightly, and his face couldn't be seen clearly. He put one hand on the altar table, closed his eyes slightly, and then slowly opened them. He looked at Xiao Wanru sharply, took a deep breath, and said, Xiao Wanru, what do you mean? First young master of the Qi family, what do you mean? According to these officials, the first young master of the Qi family was with a girl just now, and the girl was not me. But the first young master of the Qi family misunderstood me and ruined my reputation. Why did you come here? We should have settled the scores when we were in Jiangzhou, right? Xiao Wanru said coldly. She sneered in her heart. Just now, Qi Tianyu had hinted to push the blame to her. Now that she showed up, he intended to push the blame to her directly. She was really not afraid of falling out with him, lest Qi Tianyu pretended to be her childhood sweetheart and had a deep affection for her. Qi Tianyu frowned secretly when she mentioned what had happened in Jiangzhou as soon as she came up. He was most unwilling to mention what had happened in Jiangzhou. No matter how it came about, he had been cuckolded by Qin Yuru at that time. Any man would feel ashamed when talking about this kind of thing. Qi Tianyu, who had always been intelligent, knew that it was not appropriate to mention what had happened in Jiangzhou at this time, so he simply ignored Xiao Wanru's words and continued to talk about his own topic with a sad look. Wanru, you asked me to come here, and I also came here after receiving your letter. As for the miss just now, I don't know her. She just happened to appear here and left just now. Chapter 523. It's not the first Miss Xiao but the fifth Miss Xiao who met you in private. There's even a letter. That's great. Let me have a look. Chiu Yu, who followed them, suddenly felt that he had come back to life. He reached out to grab the letter, unfolded it and read it. He burst out laughing and said, it's really a letter to meet the first young master of the Qi family. Look, even the time and place are clearly stated. After saying that, Chiu Yu glanced at Xiao Wanru contemptuously. He had thought that Xiao Wanru was a pure girl, but he didn't expect that she was a lascivious one. He was afraid that Xiao Wanru would snatch the letter away and others would not read it, so he showed it to the people beside him. The others passed it one by one and looked at Xiao Wanru with disdain. The girl's beautiful handwriting showed that she was meeting someone in private. She was indeed a girl who didn't abide by the rules for girls. Can I have a look at this letter? After most of them had finished reading it, Xiao Wanru said unhurriedly. Someone passed the letter over, and Xiao Wanru took it. Wanru, it's you who asked me out, and now it's also you who made it like this. As for the first Miss Xiao you mentioned, I didn't see her at all. Could it be that you want to set me up to frame the first Miss Xiao? If it's true, I was blind to take you as a good girl and come to see you, but it turns out that, it's just a trap. Qi Tianyu said angrily. He pounded on the table with his hand and his face turned red with anger. A trap. After reading it, Xiao Wanru knocked on the letter with her fingers and looked sideways at Qi Tianyu. Qi Tianyu couldn't help feeling flustered when he saw Xiao Wanru's clear watery eyes. He hadn't seen Xiao Wanru for more than 2 years. 2 years ago, Xiao Wanru was just a child. Now she had grown up. Her watery eyes made his heart beat faster. Because, 2 years ago, although her appearance was exquisite, she was still a child. Now, who knew how beautiful and outstanding she was? Qi Tianyu had never doubted Xiao Wanru's appearance. Glancing at her charming and pure eyes, he felt a little flustered inexplicably. First young master of the Qi family, I don't remember that we're so close. When we were in Jiangzhou, because of first Miss Qin, we've made it clear that we'll fight to the death. Does the current situation mean that we'll fight to the death? It's been almost 3 years since I said this. I didn't expect first young master Qi to have never taken it to heart. Xiao Wanru handed the letter to Qiu Yu and said decisively, I didn't write this letter. For a man to want to fight to the death with a woman, how much hatred must there be between them? Under such great hatred, was it really possible for 2 people to have an affair? The people of the Ministry of Justice had always been sensitive. They immediately thought of many possibilities. It was a trap. Yes, it was definitely a trap to frame the 5th Miss Xiao in front of them. Many people were immediately persuaded. At first glance, they could tell that the 5th Miss Xiao in front of them was a pure and dignified girl. How could she do such a thing? Moreover, the 5th Miss Xiao had always had a good reputation. Qiu Yu subconsciously took the letter, looked at the letter on the letter, and then looked at Xiao Wanru. He felt that he was also confused. This letter is not mine. You can tell by looking at the letter paper. I can't make such a good flower paper. I cultivate in seclusion on the mountain, so I don't know how to make it. I heard that many misses, who are clever and kind, will make the mark of their name on the flower paper. I wonder if it is marked with my name or big sister Xiao Yanru's name. Xiao Wanru said unhurriedly. Looking at her unhurried look, Qi Tianyu had an intuition that something was wrong. He reached into his bosom and touched another letter, which was sent by Xiao Yanru. She said that she had made an appointment with him on behalf of Xiao Wanru and asked him to make it clear with Xiao Wanru. He had known about it for a long time and wanted to leave after receiving the letter. However, he received another letter, which was sent by Xiao Wanru's personal maid named Yujie. The time and address of the private meeting were written in this letter. If it was taken as evidence, of course, it would be more convincing if it was written by Xiao Wanru. After thinking for a while, Qi Tianyu took out Xiao Wanru's letter and hid Xiao Yanru's letter. Although he felt that it was not good at this time, it was inconvenient for him to take out the other letter. Several people from the Ministry of Justice came up to Qiu Yu and carefully identified it. Some of them were children of aristocratic families, so they were very proficient in this kind of flower paper. After a few glances, someone immediately said, it's a character of Ru. Look at the flower leaves and the grass patterns. As he spoke, he reached out to gesture, and many people immediately nodded. They were all from the Ministry of Justice and had sharp eyes. As soon as he said that, everyone immediately understood that this piece of paper was not the 5th Miss Xiao's, but the 1st Miss Xiao's. It was obviously the 1st Miss Xiao who made an appointment with Qi Tianyu, not the 5th Miss Xiao. First young master of the Qi family, we have said that we will fight to the death, so we don't need to contact each other in the future. However, don't blame this letter on me in the future. I don't care who you have an affair with and who you want to meet here. I just hope that you won't mention my name again. After saying that, Xiao Wanru decisively turned around and left. Qi Tianyu wanted to stop her, but he opened his mouth and didn't know what to say. At the first glance, he clearly knew that Xiao Wanru in front of him was no longer the Qin Wanru in the past. Qing followed Xiao Wanru for a few steps. She seemed to be really angry. She turned her head, put one hand on her waist, and said angrily, First young master of the Qi family, why are you so sure that this letter is from my master? Our miss has been on the mountain for more than 2 years, and she has no news with you at all. Why do you blame our miss for a private meeting after receiving a letter from you? Did you always use our miss as a shield for you and first Miss Qin when you were in Jiangzhou? Please stay away from our miss in the future. Qing, Xiao Wanru stopped and called in a low voice. Miss, I'm coming. Qing, answered, turned around and left with the lantern in her hand. The people present looked at each other and didn't know what to say for a moment. Everyone turned their eyes to Qi Tianyu. What happened in Jiangzhou had been recorded in the Ministry of Justice because the coachman who wanted to kidnap Xiao Wanru had been taken away. Everyone present knew this matter. At that time, the first miss of the Qin's mansion and Qi Tianyu did push all the blame onto Xiao Wanru, who was still the second Mississippi. Could it be that what happened today was a repeat of what happened at that time? Some people who knew the inside story of Jiangzhou believed it. If there was one, there would be a second. In fact, it was not strange. The fifth Miss Xiao had always been a scapegoat for others, but she was framed again. Tianyu, did you really meet the first Miss Xiao in private? Qiu Yu's hands were trembling, and he only felt angry. It was obvious that he liked the first Miss Xiao, but how could his brother meet her in private at night? Moreover, the letter was passed through his hands. The more he thought about it, the more he felt that he had been used as a stepping stone. He couldn't get rid of this anger. As soon as he saw Qiu Yu's expression, Qi Tianyu knew that it was not good. He immediately restrained his thoughts and tried to comfort Qiu Yu. Qi Tianyu, no wonder you repeatedly told me to meet the miss of the Xiao's mansion when I came to the mountain to investigate the case this time. No wonder you were so ecstatic when I gave you the letter from the first Miss Xiao. It turns out that you and the first Miss Xiao, actually. Qiu Yu felt so distressed that he couldn't even say a word. He pointed at Qi Tianyu with trembling fingers and couldn't continue. The letter in his hand was thrown to Qi Tianyu's face. Qiu Yu was so angry that his face turned red. He stamped his feet hard and turned to leave. At the scene, the crowd looked at each other and didn't know how to deal with it at the moment. Hey, look, it's really the first Miss Xiao. Look, there's a character, Ru, on this handkerchief. I just picked it up at the back door of the side hall. A person from the Ministry of Justice came in with a handkerchief in his hand and a smile. The pattern on the corner of the exquisite handkerchief, which looked like a flower, was exactly the same as the one made just now. Needless to say, it was indeed made by the same person. The people from the Ministry of Justice looked at each other. Was the first Miss Xiao, who had a good reputation and would soon be selected as the princess consort of the prince, really so unbearable? With such a good reputation, she shouldn't have done such a thing, right? Could it be done by the woman just now? But was the woman the first Miss Xiao? It was really not easy to judge without seeing her face. Xiao Yanru ran out from the back door in a hurry. Along the way, she didn't have time to look around and hurriedly returned to her courtyard. Fearing that she would meet someone on the way, she took a longer detour. It was not until she reached the gate of the courtyard that she breathed a sigh of relief. What happened just now was too thrilling. If someone saw her face, her reputation would really be ruined. Fortunately, she didn't let anyone see her face in the end. But what on earth happened just now? She clearly heard a man's voice outside the hall before, but why did Qi Tianyu pass out early after entering the hall? Who was the extra man? As she thought about it, she was about to push the gate of the courtyard and enter. Suddenly, she heard a man's heavy voice coming from the courtyard. She was stunned. Why did a man come over at this time? Come on, come on. The man's voice was heavy and a little familiar. Hearing it, Xiao Yanru's breath quickened. It was obviously the man's voice she had heard outside the hall before. If it weren't for this voice, she wouldn't have stepped into the hall given her character. What are you doing? Xiao Yanru's three maids' voices were distinctive. Xiao Yanru, who had been familiar with their voices these days, immediately recognized that it was Chu Li's voice. This man was so familiar with Chu Lu. Needless to say, he was even more familiar with Xiao Wanru. She gently pushed the gate of the courtyard and gritted her teeth. She could be sure that she had suffered a loss today. Xiao Wanru must have played a part in it, but she didn't know the other man. This time, she must catch this man. As long as she caught this man, she would like to see how Xiao Wanru would defend herself. Chapter 524. The door of the courtyard was wide open, and there were only Chu Lu and Qing in the courtyard. Shuqi looked around and didn't find any man. She stepped forward and said angrily, "Tell me, who was the man just now?" "A man?" Chu Lu and Qing looked at each other and didn't seem to understand Shuqi's words for a moment. Looking at Xiao Yenru's gloomy face, they both blinked to show that they didn't understand. "How dare you two deny it? First Miss and I clearly heard Chu Lu talking to a man just now." Shuqi reached out to point at Chu Lu, and her fingertips almost touched Chu Li's nose, as if she had come to catch them in the act. Chu Lu didn't understand at first, and then suddenly laughed. Qing also laughed so hard that she couldn't straighten up. Chu Lu reached out to slap Shuqi's hand away and said with a smile, "Do you want to ask me, which man did I talk to just now? Is that what you mean? Go ahead." Shuqi didn't dare to look at her master's livid face at all and said angrily, "Shuqi, do you mean me? I was talking to Sister Chu Lu just now." Qing smiled and changed her voice. It was a man's voice. Hearing this voice, Xiao Yenru's face turned red and then green, and she almost couldn't control her anger. She looked up at the corridor and found Xiao Wanru standing there with a smile. Seeing her look over, Xiao Wanru deliberately tilted her head and asked, "Big sister, is it fun in the main hall?" "Is it fun in the main hall?" Xiao Yenru almost tore the handkerchief in her hand. Now she understood everything. It turned out that she had fallen into Xiao Wanru's trap. She figured everything out. No wonder Xiao Wanru only took Qing with her instead of other personal maids. On one hand, Qing could imitate a man's voice very well. On the other hand, Qing was an inferior maid. Although she was small, she might be stronger than the two personal maids, so it was not a problem for her to knock her unconscious. As for Qi Tianyu, he was probably knocked unconscious because he didn't guard against this little maid. She strode to the corridor, reached out to point at Xiao Wanru, and said angrily, "Xiao Wanru, I treat you sincerely. Why do you treat me like this? Treat me sincerely?" Xiao Wanru tilted her head and blinked her watery eyes as if she really didn't understand. "If you treat me sincerely, will you encourage me to meet someone else in private? Big sister has read so many rules for unmarried girls, but I didn't know that there was such a rule that encouraged one's sisters to meet men in private. Why don't eldest sister report this to old madam?" Seeing her fearless look, Xiao Yenru was so angry that her lungs were about to explode, but she couldn't do anything to her. If she told old madam about this, old madam would definitely know that she was up to no good. Even though she knew that old madam would protect her, Xiao Yenru didn't want her gentle image to change in old madam's mind. She had thought that Xiao Wanru was only 11 years old before. Even if she had stayed on the mountain for a few years, her temperament could not change much. She had underestimated Xiao Wanru and was really careless. "Fifth younger sister, not only was my good intentions treated as ill intent, but I was also harmed by you to such a state. I'm blind." Xiao Yenru snorted coldly, turned around and left angrily. It seemed that she was really wronged and angry because she was harmed by Xiao Wanru. At this time, she couldn't really fall out with Xiao Wanru. Seeing Xiao Yenru leave, Xiao Wanru slowly walked into the door of the silence room. Yujia stepped forward to help her take off her cloak and then served tea. Xiao Wanru sat down in front of the mat. Her watery eyes flickered, and she began to ponder. "Miss, will the first miss have a bad reputation tomorrow?" Yujia folded her cloak and said, "No." Xiao Wanru shook her head and said with certainty, "Her reputation is so good that people don't think she would do such a thing. Moreover, with her identity, she doesn't seem to be a person who will like Qi Tianyu." Xiao Yenru's target had always been those princes. Qi Tianyu couldn't attract her attention. This was a fact. Not only she thought so, but also others thought so. As the first Miss Xiao, who was both talented and beautiful and had the background of Duke Xing's mansion, she could be said to be the favored daughter of heaven. Such a favored daughter could only be matched by the noble child's. Qi Tianyu's foundation was too shallow. That's not necessarily true. There are some superior favored daughters who like ordinary men. Yujia curled her lips and said, when I was in Jiangzhou, I heard some stories about talented men and beautiful women. Although the first young master of the Qi family is a jerk, he is still a talented man. The first miss is the same. Regardless of character, she is a beautiful woman. In this regard, they are very compatible. Seeing Yujia take it for granted, Xiao Wanru burst into laughter and said, Yujia, you used to cultivate on the mountain, didn't you? You even have stories to read. Does Mingxiu Nun know about it? Yujia was tongue-tied. After a long while, she said with a bitter face and grievance, Miss, you can't tell Mingxiu Nun about it. I can only tell you about it, but I dare not tell Mingxiu Nun. Then tell me where you got the stories to read. Xiao Wanru was interested. Jingxin Monastery definitely didn't have their own stories. I occasionally went down the mountain, to buy medicine for Mingxiu Nun, and, by the way. Yujia blinked her eyes. Seeing her master's curious and bright eyes, she knew that she had to say it, so she could only say it sleepily. So you embezzled Mingxiu Nun's money to buy medicine and secretly bought the stories to read. Xiao Wanru laughed. It was really funny that a nun, who was a cultivator, was reading this kind of storybook. Miss, I'm telling you something serious. Why can't the first miss gossip about you tomorrow? Why can't the first miss and the first young master of the Qi family gossip? Yujia stamped her feet angrily and said loudly. Xiao Wanru reached out a white and tender finger and gently pressed it on her lips, signaling her to speak softly. Miss, tell me. Why can't they? Yujia immediately lowered her voice and said. Qi Tianyu doesn't want to ruin my reputation. He just wants to control me. He should have been prepared for it. Moreover, it has something to do with Xiao Yanru, which is even more unbelievable. Xiao Wanru smiled slightly, and there was a clear light in her eyes. In fact, not only Qi Tianyu, but also Xiao Yanru must have planned it. Otherwise, Qi Tianyu wouldn't have been so obedient and cooperative with Xiao Yanru. Unexpectedly, Qi Tianyu and Xiao Yanru had hooked up in just over 2 years. In this way, Qi Rongji really played a big role. In the last life, Qi Tianyu and Xiao Yanru should have colluded with each other. She had seen Xiao Yanru talking with Qi Tianyu, but they met through Qin Yuru in the last life. In this life, Qin Yuru didn't work, so she used Qi Rongji. It could be seen that the two of them were fated to meet. Whether it was in her previous life or this life, she had long since died. Entangled with each other. Since it's useless, I might as well not do anything. Yujia said in frustration. It was a pity that she couldn't hurt the first Mississippi. It was equivalent to catching the first miss in bed, but she couldn't. The collapse of a 1,000-mile dike can be caused by an ant hole. Take it slow. Xiao Wanru said pointedly, blinking her beautiful big eyes. Now Xiao Yanru had an excellent reputation. Even if there was something going on, everyone thought it was impossible. However, if such things happened frequently, how long could Xiao Yanru hold on? She was still young and had plenty of time to waste, but Xiao Yanru was not young. In any case, Xiao Yanru's target couldn't be the emperor in the palace. Yujia was really curious why Xiao Yanru failed to marry anyone she wanted in the last life and finally became the emperor's. Hearing Xiao Wanru's words, Yujia was happy again. She immediately nodded and said, Miss, it's getting late. Let me serve you to have a rest. It was indeed getting late. Xiao Wanru stood up and looked out of the window. It was dark outside the window. It was indeed getting late. It's getting cold at night. Let me close the window for you. Yujia came over and reached out to close the window. Suddenly, she saw a black shadow flash by the window. She hurriedly took a few steps back and looked at Prince Chen in front of her in astonishment. Yujie was familiar with the pale and sickly Prince Chen. But now Prince Chen, who used to be too sick to get out of bed in Yujie's heart, actually flew up from under the window. How could she not be shocked? If she remembered correctly, there should be a cliff outside the window. Go down. Chu Luchen waved his hand. His thick black clothes made his extremely elegant and delicate eyebrows and eyes appear in the light. Xiao Wanru suddenly found that he not only looked like a handsome young man coming out of ink and wash, but also had a strange sense of evil beauty in the night. Under his pale and handsome face, the ink-colored mink fur made his eyebrows and eyes look as white and light as jade. But even so, he was still extremely handsome and elegant. Xiao Yanru gestured to Yujie to let her go down. Xiao Wanru sat down in front of the mat again, poured a cup of tea for him, and said, "Your Highness, please come and have tea." She looked natural, as if she didn't think there was anything wrong with Chu Luchen coming here at this time. Yujie looked at Xiao Wanru's calm face and then looked at Prince Chen's gentle face. Feeling that there would be nothing wrong, she carefully left and closed the door for them. Several henchmen knew that their miss was going to enter Prince Chen's mansion. Yujie didn't feel that it was wrong for Prince Chen to appear here unpredictably. Instead, she felt that it was very good. At least it could show that Prince Chen was not terminally ill. That was good, that was good. As long as Prince Chen was healthy, it didn't matter. There seemed to be some noise in her ears, but after listening carefully, it seemed to be gone. Yujie shook her head and wondered if she had an auditory hallucination recently. She always felt that there were some faint noises in her ears, but every time she listened carefully, she felt that it was the sound of the mountain winds sweeping over the stones and branches. It was strange. Could it be that she hadn't had a good rest recently? She would ask Mingqiu Nun tomorrow and ask her to prescribe some medicine for her. Otherwise, she couldn't even sleep well. Chapter 525. Is he angry? The smile on his face could hardly be hidden. Your Highness, did you get involved in the previous matter? Xiao Wanru asked with concern. Although Xiao Wanru didn't know the truth about the previous matter, it was obvious that there were too many people involved. She was afraid that it was not a scheme that one person could set up. In the past few days, the officials of the Ministry of Justice had sealed the entire Yuhui nunnery. There were so many people coming and going every day. It seemed that the entire Yuhui nunnery had been turned upside down. However, Xiao Wanru knew that the people on the other side of the high wall had actually been checked once. The door was tightly sealed. After that, all the people on the other side of the high wall had been checked. It had nothing to do with the S of the former emperor behind the high wall. It was tight on the outside but loose on the inside. No matter how she looked at it, it seemed to be mysterious. I'm sick. Chu Luchen looked sideways at her and smiled with a faint light flickering in his eyes. Then he put down the teacup in his hand. Xiao Wanru immediately leaned over and refilled his cup of tea for him. The officials of the Ministry of Justice are still on the mountain now. Will it be dangerous for you to go up the mountain at this time? After all, he had been pretending to be sick now. If he was found, it would be extremely bad. If I didn't come, would I miss today's good show? Chu Luchen said leisurely. He picked up the teacup and took another sip. He squinted at Xiao Wanru, which made her panic. Your Highness, the first miss of Xiao's mansion wanted to plot against me. I just beat her at her own game. Xiao Wanru said cautiously with all kinds of speculations in her heart. Could it be that Xiao Yanru had a very good relationship with Prince Qin in private because she was so capable? Beat her at her own game? Chu Luchen raised his eyebrows. The smile at the bottom of his eyes faded away, making people feel that his eyes were increasingly gloomy and frightening. Xiao Wanru nodded hard to show her sincerity. Yes, I beat her at her own game. If you want to beat him at his own game, What about the letter you sent to Qi Tianyu before? Chu Luchen said slowly. Others didn't know about the letter, but Xiao Wanru didn't think that Chu Luchen knew about it. She hurriedly explained frankly, Xiao Yanru helped me send a letter asking him to meet me. Although I don't know what's written in it, if Qi Tianyu wants to take it as evidence, it must be the letter written by me. If he takes it out, it will involve Xiao Yanru. Chu Luchen stared at her beautiful eyes carefully. When she mentioned Qi Tianyu, there was no ripple in her watery eyes, as if he was an irrelevant person. Chu Luchen was slightly satisfied. Stay away from him in the future. Don't write to just anyone. Chu Luchen snorted coldly and said with a displeased look. Then he reached out to hold Xiao Wanru's hand and said, let's go. I'll take you to explore the way. Xiao Wanru stood up after being pulled by him. Hearing his words, she hurriedly held his hand and said, Your Highness, you can't walk around at this time. If someone finds you, it will be a big deal. Now there might be people from the Ministry of Justice even at night. Of course, they couldn't walk around at this time. Who knew if there were people from the Ministry of Justice hiding in the dark? No one will find us. Chu Luchen smiled triumphantly. He looked at the slender hand that held him tightly. She didn't use much strength, but it inexplicably made him feel good. The smile slowly spread from his face to the bottom of his eyes. Xiao Wanru didn't know how she pleased Chu Luchen. Although he also smiled gently, she could tell that he was really happy at this time. This person could be angry one moment and happy the next. It was really hard to fathom. However, thinking about it, it was normal. If this person could be figured out, he wouldn't have sat on the throne of the final winner in the last life. He even asked his uncle to pass the throne to his nephew instead of his son. It could be seen that his means must be powerful. Your Highness, there are many people from the Ministry of Justice here. When Xiao Yanru and I went out before, we found people from the Ministry of Justice guarding at the door. Although it is at night, we can't guarantee that they are not here. Xiao Wanru's hand slipped to his sleeve. It was really difficult to hold his wrist, and it was much easier to hold his sleeve. It seemed that Chu Luchen was going to take her out again. It was so late at night, and she didn't want to go out at all. What are you afraid of? I won't go in from the front door. Chu Luchen said casually. He stretched out his hand and pulled hard. Xiao Wanru couldn't stand still and staggered to fall on him. He reached out his other hand and held Xiao Wanru in his arms with great familiarity. Let's go down from the back window. There was a cliff outside the window. Xiao Wanru had seen it more than once. Hearing his words, she was so scared that her face turned pale. She didn't have time to struggle and hurriedly persuaded, Your Highness, there is a cliff outside the window. You know that if something goes wrong in such a place, we will be smashed to pieces. No. Chu Luchen walked to the window with Xiao Wanru in his arms, looked out of the window and said lightly. Xiao Wanru was so scared that her whole body tightened. This time, she held Chu Luchen tightly not with one hand but with both hands. She raised her beautiful eyes with some delicate sadness and clearly showed her weakness. Your Highness, we really can't take risks. Even if it's in case, we can't take risks. Seeing her pitiful look, Chu Luchen suddenly laughed. He put his other hand around her, hugged her, and said softly in her ear, I won't change my decision. It's useless for you to pretend to be pitiful. Xiao Wanru's sad expression froze on her face. After being stunned, she subconsciously reached out to pinch him hard. After being exposed, she became angry out of shame and said, Your Highness, it's really dangerous down there. You don't want to live, but I still want to live. As soon as she finished speaking, Xiao Wanru immediately came to her senses. Looking at the smile on Chu Luchen's handsome face, she blushed at once. These were her true thoughts. How could she say it so easily? Don't worry. I don't want to die so early. I haven't married and had children yet. He suddenly jumped up and fell straight to the window. Chu Liuchen's gentle voice was in her ears, but at this moment, Xiao Wanru was shocked. She gritted her teeth, hugged Chu Liuchen tightly, closed her eyes, softened her body, and let him do whatever he wanted. The current situation was beyond her control, but he didn't look like the kind of person who was courting death. She paused and stepped on something very quickly. Wasn't it a cliff? Xiao Wanru didn't open her eyes, and she didn't dare to move her feet. She always felt that her heart was not quite at ease. Chu Liuchen lowered his head and saw that her whole body was soft and she was holding him tightly. He raised the corners of his mouth and smiled more leisurely. He reached out to pat her face gently and said softly, "You can open your eyes. It's okay. Even if you really fall down, it's okay. There's water below." Xiao Wanru slowly opened her eyes. She first opened one eye, looked around, and found that there was a protruding rock under her feet. Then she breathed a sigh of relief and opened the other eye with relief. Seeing her deceiving herself, the lingering fear on her delicate little face, and her soft body snuggling up to him, Chu Liuchen was in a very good mood. He took Xiao Wanru, whose feet were soft, and took a step forward, leaving the edge of the rock. After taking a few steps, Xiao Wanru felt that she was really standing on the ground instead of in the air. Although her feet were uneven, she was still on the ground. She put down her hand and tightly grabbed a corner of Chu Liuchen's robe. She looked around, but she couldn't see clearly in the darkness. She only felt that there seemed to be a hole in front of her. A hole? There was a hole under the silence room. Xiao Wanru's face turned pale in shock. Is this dug out or natural? She was not stupid. She didn't expect it at first, but now she thought about it carefully and found it extremely terrifying. "Let's go in and have a look." Chu Liuchen held her slender waist and supported her to walk in. In the darkness, Xiao Wanru followed Chu Liuchen's footsteps and moved with difficulty. Fortunately, she was half held in Chu Liuchen's arms. When she accidentally tripped, Chu Liuchen would pick her up. After taking a few steps, they were blocked in front of them. Was there no way out? It was just a small natural cave. Xiao Wanru breathed a sigh of relief. No one wanted to see a passage suddenly appear under the place where they lived. But the next moment, Chu Liuchen took her to the side to avoid it. A man in black appeared out of nowhere and bowed to Chu Liuchen respectfully. Chu Liuchen nodded. The man in black stepped forward and pushed the stone blocking the door. The big stone was slowly pushed away, and then a dim light slowly overflowed. It was very faint. If they hadn't been in front of them, they might not have been able to see it. When the stone was pushed halfway, the man in black stepped aside. Chu Liuchen held Xiao Wanru in his arms and turned a corner. Then everything in front of them suddenly changed. Not far away, there was an oil lamp hanging. Under the oil lamp, there was a fallen figure. A little farther away, there was another person and another oil lamp. They couldn't see them after turning a corner. There were very few passages, and one person could squeeze in. It seemed that the passage was expanding now. The oil lamp was dim and faintly illuminated the place. The rest of the passage was still dark. They couldn't see the farther place after turning a corner. This was a passage that was still being opened. Xiao Wanru didn't dare to move and stiffened in Chu Liuchen's arms. Under her silence room, there was not a passage that had been dug, but a passage that was being dug. She didn't know where it extended from, or maybe she didn't know where it was going to extend to. "Are they dead?" Xiao Wanru bit her lip and managed to suppress the scream in her throat. She lowered her voice and asked. "They are not dead. They just passed out temporarily," Chu Liuchen said casually. He shook his robe and then retreated behind the stone with Xiao Wanru in his arms. He said to the guard in black who was guarding there, "Wake them up." The guard in black nodded and lowered his body into the cave. Chu Liuchen turned around and came to the edge of the mountain rock outside with Xiao Wanru in his arms. The cloak wrapped Xiao Wanru's whole body, revealing only her delicate and beautiful little face. He looked down at Xiao Wanru and found that her skin was as smooth as jade with a touch of pink. She was so beautiful under the moonlight. However, she looked a little confused and ignorant at this moment, which made her look a little pitiful. Her beautiful eyes were wide open, and even her red cherry lips seemed to show a little pity. He reached out to pinch her pretty nose and said with a smile, "Let's go." You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.